I still remember the exact moment. The road stopped feeling empty. It was around 2:17 a.m. when I first saw her. A woman standing in the middle of the highway like she had been placed there, not like she walked there. No cars, no wind, no sound except my engine and the low crackle of the radio. And then her, just standing under the weak glow of my headlights, facing me. Not moving, not even blinking, I think. My foot eased off the gas without me deciding it. The truck rolled slower, like it was also unsure what it was looking at. That was the first thing that felt wrong. Because this highway is never supposed to be empty, but tonight it was worse than empty. It felt paused, like the world had stopped buffering. I leaned forward slightly, squinting through the windshield. Could be a lost pedestrian, I told myself. But even as I said it in my head, I knew it didn't make sense. There are no houses for miles here, no bus stops, no side roads, nothing. Just long dark road and desert on both sides. And her, still standing, still waiting. The radio in my truck suddenly cracked. Dispatch voice came in, calm and bored like always. Unit 7, report your status. I grabbed the mic. On Route 9, all clear so far. My voice sounded normal, but my eyes stayed locked on her. And then something happened that I still don't fully understand. She took one step back, not toward the side of the road, not away, just backward into darkness, like the shadows were a door she knew how to use. I hit the brakes, hard. The tires screamed against the silence. When I finally stopped, she was gone. No footsteps, no movement, no sound of running, just gone. My heart was beating too fast for something that had lasted maybe 10 seconds. I lowered the window. Cold air rushed in. Nothing smelled like anything. No dust, no exhaust, no life. I laughed once under my breath because my brain needed something normal. Okay, I whispered. That didn't happen like that. I checked the rearview mirror. Empty road. Checked the side mirror. Empty road. Then I did something stupid. I got out. The highway was colder outside the truck. Not weather cold, something else, like the air had been sitting still for too long. I walked a few steps forward, scanning the ground. No footprints. That was the second thing that didn't make sense. If someone had been standing there, there should be something. But there was nothing. Just smooth, untouched asphalt. I turned back toward my truck. And that's when I noticed the engine was still running, even though I was sure I had turned it off. A small detail, but it hit me in a strange way. Like someone had corrected my memory. I climbed back in quickly. Locked the doors. The radio hissed again. Unit 7, you did not respond properly. Repeat status. I frowned. I just responded. A pause. Then dispatch said something that made my stomach tighten. We have no record of any pedestrian on Route 9 tonight. I stared at the dashboard. No record. No reports, no emergency calls, stay alert. The radio clicked off, but I didn't move because I was thinking about her again. The way she stood too still. The way she didn't react to headlights. The way she stepped backward like she already knew where the road ended. I restarted the truck slowly. The engine felt louder now, like it was angry at me for stopping. As I drove forward, I kept checking the road. Nothing, but my mind wasn't calm anymore. It kept replaying that moment. Her face, or what I thought was her face. I realized something else then. I never actually saw her features clearly. Just a shape, a silhouette, like my brain had filled in details that weren't really there. That was the third thing that bothered me, because I remember her so clearly, but also not at all. About 10 minutes later, I saw her again. Same spot, same position, standing in the middle of the highway like nothing had changed. My hands tightened around the steering wheel. No, I said out loud this time. My brain tried to reject it. Maybe a trick of light. Maybe fatigue. Maybe my eyes playing games in the dark. But the headlights proved me wrong. She was there. Again. Exactly where she shouldn't be. And this time, I didn't slow down right away. I kept driving toward her. Not fast. Not slow. Just steady. Because part of me needed to know if she would move. The distance closed. 300 meters. And then something strange happened. The radio cracked again, but this time it wasn't dispatch. It was breathing. Soft. Close. Like someone was standing right next to the microphone. I froze. The woman on the road didn't move. The breathing continued. Slow. Patient. And then, right when I reached maybe 50 meters from her, she turned her head. Just slightly. Like she was listening to me think. My foot slammed the brake. The truck skidded again. And she was gone. Not walking. Not fatting. Just not there anymore. I sat frozen for a full minute. No words. No thoughts. Just that feeling that something had started repeating. That this wasn't the first time. Even though I knew it had to be. I checked my dash cam. The screen showed the road. Empty. No woman. No movement. Nothing. I replayed the footage. Still nothing. But I remember her. I remember her clearly. That was the moment my stomach turned cold. Because memory and evidence were no longer matching. And I didn't know which one to trust. I started driving again, slower now. Careful. Watching every shadow like it might decide to stand up. That's when I noticed something new. My fuel gauge had dropped. Too much. Way too much for the distance I had traveled. I looked at the odometer. It showed more miles than I remembered driving tonight. A lot more. I whispered, that's not possible. The road ahead stretched longer than it should have. Like the highway had quietly extended itself while I wasn't paying attention. And then, the radio clicked one more time. But this time no voice came. Only a single sentence. Whispered. Not from dispatch. From inside the speaker. You already stopped for her. My throat went dry. I looked around the cab. Empty. But I suddenly felt something very clear. I was not alone in the truck. And somewhere ahead on Route 9. The woman was waiting again. I didn't believe it at first. I told myself the dash cam must be glitching. That's what I kept repeating while sitting in my truck at 3:06 a.m., engine idling, hands cold on the steering wheel. Because what I saw on that footage, I swear it wasn't me. It showed my truck stopping. On Route 9. Exactly where I saw her. The woman, standing in the middle of the road again. But here the problem. I don't remember stopping. Not even a little. And that gap in my memory, it feels heavier than fear. It feels like something was taken out of my head and put back wrong. I pressed rewind again. The grainy dashcam video flickered. My headlights cut through the darkness in the recording, and there she was. Standing still. Same position. Same unnatural calm. And then on the footage, my brake lights turned on. My truck slowed down. Stopped completely. I leaned closer to the screen. No, no, I didn't do that, I whispered. But the video didn't care what I remembered. It showed everything. My driver door unlocking. My body getting out. Me walking toward her. Step by step. Into the dark. My throat went dry instantly. I sat back so fast my chair creaked. That's not me, I said out loud. But it was me. Same jacket. Same walk. Same limp I got from an old knee injury. All of it matched. Except I had no memory of it. None. I hit pause. Stared at the frozen frame. There I was, standing in front of her. Close enough to touch. Her face still unclear. Still wrong somehow. Like the camera refused to fully capture it. I rewound again. Slow this time. Frame by frame. And that's when I noticed something I missed before. Her head was tilted slightly. Not toward the truck. Not toward me. But toward something behind me. Like she was listening to a second presence I couldn't see. A chill crawled up my spine. I checked my rearview mirror instantly. Empty cab. Just me. But my reflection felt delayed. I blinked. It blinked a fraction of a second later. I looked away quickly. Nope, I muttered. I'm tired, that's it. But my voice didn't sound convinced. I turned back to the footage. My recorded self on the screen had started moving again. Reaching out. Like I was opening the passenger door. My stomach twisted. Because I remember nothing after stopping the truck. Nothing. The footage showed me leaning into the passenger seat. Like I was letting someone in. Like I was inviting her inside. Then, the camera flickered. Just for half a second. And when it stabilized, she was gone from the road. But my recorded self was still inside the truck. Sitting. Not moving. Not driving. Just sitting like something had finished happening. I paused the video again. My hands were shaking now. I forced myself to look at the timestamp. 2:17 a.m. That hit me harder than anything else. Because 2:17 a.m. was when I first saw her tonight. The first time. But the footage showed I had already interacted with her before that. Which meant I froze mid-thought. No, that couldn't be right. I grabbed my phone and checked my actual log. GPS history. Route tracker. Everything. It showed I had stopped at that exact location earlier in the night. For 6 minutes. But I remember none of it. I whispered, what did I do in those 6 minutes? No answer. Just engine hum. Just silence. Then something happened that made my chest tight. The dashcam audio started playing automatically. Even though I didn't press play. Static filled the cab. Then my own voice came through. But it didn't sound like me. It sounded slower. Distant. Like I was speaking through water. I think she needs help. I jerked back. That wasn't my voice. It kept going. I can take her to the next stop. A pause. Then faint breathing. Not mine. Not hers either. Something in between. I slammed the audio off. Silence hit instantly. Too hard. Too clean. Like the world had been muted. I sat there breathing fast, staring at the dashboard like it might explain itself. My mind started trying to build logic. Maybe I was sleepwalking. Maybe fatigue. Maybe hallucination from long shifts. But none of it explained the footage. None of it explained the missing memory. And none of it explained why the truck itself acted like I had done those things. Because vehicles don't lie. Machines don't forget. So something else had to be responsible. Something I didn't want to name yet. I decided to replay just the outside segment again. Only the road. Only her. I watched carefully this time. No distractions. And that's when I saw it. A small detail in the background. Every time she appeared, the streetlights behind her dimmed slightly. Not all at once. One by one. Like something was draining power from the air itself. I zoomed in. My eyes narrowed. The moment I stopped my truck in the recording, the shadows around her thickened unnaturally. Not like darkness, more like depth. Like the road itself was opening downward. I swallowed hard. Then the footage showed something new. Something I swear wasn't there before. A second set of headlights appeared behind my truck. But when I checked the mirror outside in real life, nothing was there. I leaned forward again, watching. The headlights in the video stayed still. Parked behind me, as if another vehicle had been following me the whole time. But I know this route. There is no traffic on Route 9 at night. There never is. I checked the time again. Still 3:06 a.m. Same moment. Same silence. But the video kept showing movement that wasn't happening in real life. That's when I realized something terrifying. The dashcam wasn't just recording. It was remembering something I was. A version of the night I never lived. My breathing got heavier. I felt like the cab was getting smaller. I looked toward the passenger seat without thinking. Empty. But for a split second, I swear I saw condensation on the glass. Like someone had just exhaled there. Slowly, right next to me. I turned back to the dashcam screen immediately. The recording had frozen again. On a single frame. Me sitting in the driver's seat. But the passenger seat slightly distorted. Like something was leaning into it. Not fully visible. Just enough to feel wrong. I turned the key off. The engine shut down. Sudden silence. Too sharp. I sat there in the dark truck, not moving. And that's when the radio clicked on by itself. No static this time. Just one sentence. Calm. Close. Almost gentle. You already let her in. I didn't speak. I couldn't, because my hand was shaking as I slowly turned toward the passenger seat again. And this time, I noticed something new. The seatbelt was unbuckled and slightly pulled forward, like someone had just leaned away from it. Seconds ago, I didn't look at the mirrors at first. That was the mistake, because the moment I stopped trusting the road, the mirrors started telling me a different story. And I swear, it was a story I didn't want to know. It began with something small. A flicker. I was driving again on Route 9, engine humming low, hands still tense from the last chapter of the night I couldn't explain. The passenger seat still felt wrong. Like air had weight there now. Like something had recently leaned back and decided to stay invisible. I kept my eyes forward. Straight road. Empty darkness. No movement. No woman. That should have been a relief. But it was. Because silence doesn't feel safe when you've already heard it speak. That's when I noticed the rearview mirror. It was slightly angled. Not the way I left it. I remember adjusting it earlier. I always do before long shifts. But now it pointed a little too far left. Like it was trying to avoid showing me something behind me. I frowned. Did I move that? I whispered. No answer. Just engine sound. Just road. I reached up and fixed it without thinking. The mirror clicked into place. For a second, Everything looked normal. Then I saw her. Not on the road. Not outside. In the mirror. Standing in the back seat. I froze so hard my hand stayed in midair. My breath stopped before my brain could even react. Because the seat behind me was empty. I didn't turn. I didn't dare. I just stared at the mirror, waiting for logic to catch up. Nothing behind me. Just darkness. Just fabric seats. But in the mirror, she was there, sitting now, not standing, calm, perfectly still, her head slightly tilted forward, like she was watching the road through my eyes. I swallowed hard. Slowly I looked back. Empty. I turned forward again. Mirror. She was still there. Same position. Same silence. My heart started hitting my ribs like it wanted out. No, I muttered. No, no, no. I pulled the truck slightly to the side of the road. Stopped. Engaged the handbrake. Then looked again. Back seat. Empty. Mirror. She was smiling now. Not fully. Just slightly. Like she knew I was starting to understand the rules. I whispered, "You're not real." The mirror didn't answer, but her head tilted a little more. Like she disagreed. I turned off the engine. The sudden silence made everything feel closer. Too close. Even my breathing felt loud. I sat still for a moment, trying to think logically. Mirrors can lie. Angles can distort. Fatigue can trick perception. But none of those explanations made her disappear. And none explained why she only existed in reflections. I slowly reached for my phone, opened the front camera, looked at the screen. Empty backseat. No woman. I let out a shaky breath. Okay, I whispered. Then I switched to the rear camera. The screen flickered. For a split second, nothing. Then she appeared again. But this time closer. Much closer. Right behind my seat. So close I could almost feel the weight of her presence through glass. I dropped the phone instantly. It hit the dashboard and slid down. My hands were shaking now. Not small shakes. Full body tension. Like my system was rejecting what I was seeing. I forced myself to look back again. Still empty. But something had changed. The air felt compressed. Like the cabin had less space than before. I reached slowly toward the rearview mirror. My fingers hovered near it. And that's when I noticed something new. My reflection in the mirror was slightly delayed. I moved my hand. My reflection moved a fraction later. I froze. That delay lasted maybe half a second. But it felt like something was learning my timing. Matching me. Copying me. Understanding me. Then my reflection blinked. One extra time. I didn't. My stomach dropped instantly. No, I whispered again, but it came out weaker this time. I leaned forward, trying to break eye contact with the mirror. But the mirror followed me. Not physically, but visually. Like the angle adjusted on its own. And then, she leaned forward in the reflection. Not in the truck, only in the mirror. Her face now closer than before. Still unclear. Still impossible to fully see. But I felt something I couldn't explain. Recognition. Like she knew me. Not just me driving, but me outside of this moment. Outside of this night. I slammed my hand on the dashboard. Stop, I shouted. Silence answered. I turned the ignition back on. The engine roared back to life too quickly. Like it had been waiting. I drove again. faster this time, trying to outrun the feeling inside the cab. But the mirror didn't change. She stayed. Every time I checked. Same position. Same distance. Sometimes closer. Sometimes still. Never gone. I started avoiding mirrors completely. Rearview stayed tilted slightly upward. Side mirrors angled away. But I could still feel her, even when I wasn't looking. That's the worst part. When fear stops needing sight. About 20 minutes later, I saw something on the road ahead. A shape. Standing again. My foot eased off the accelerator instantly. My chest tightened. No, not again, I muttered. But this time, I didn't slow down completely. I watched carefully. Headlights reached her. And just like before, she vanished before impact. No movement. No sound. Just absence. But in the mirror, she was still there, now sitting in the front passenger seat. My breath stopped completely. I didn't look sideways. I couldn't, because I knew what I would see. I forced my eyes to the mirror instead, and she slowly turned her head toward me. Not fast, not sudden, just aware, like she had finally finished deciding something. My voice cracked. What do you want from me? No answer, but her hand moved slightly, pointing forward, at the road. I hesitated, then looked ahead. The highway was normal, empty, but something felt wrong in the distance. Like the road wasn't continuing, like it was looping back into itself. I looked back at the mirror again. She was gone, just like that. No transition, no fade, empty reflection. I slammed the brakes immediately, stopped the truck, looked around. Back seat, empty. Passenger seat, empty. Mirror, empty. For the first time in what felt like hours, nothing was there. I exhaled slowly. My body felt like it was collapsing from inside. Maybe it was over. Maybe it was just exhaustion. Maybe. Then the radio turned on by itself. Static first, then her voice. Not loud, not aggressive, just calm. Too calm. You stopped seeing me. I went cold. The radio continued. But I never left your reflections. I looked at the mirror again instantly. And there it was. Just for a second. A faint shape. Not fully formed. But enough. Watching me again. And this time, she wasn't behind me. She was inside the glass, waiting for me to look longer. The GPS was lying. I knew it the moment I saw it, because there is no way I drove 47 kilometers in 18 minutes without remembering a single second of it. I sat there frozen in the cab, eyes locked on the dashboard screen, watching the route history reload again, and again like it was trying to convince me of something I didn't live. Route 9, normal start. Then a gap. A long, clean gap. No turns, no stops, no signals. Just missing time. Where did I go? I whispered. My voice felt che-u-je-de, like it belonged to someone else. I scrolled back again. Same result. Same impossible stretch of nothing. But my fuel gauge told a different story. It was almost empty, and I remembered clearly filling it before shift. I should have been halfway through the night, not running on fumes like I had been driving for hours. But I wasn't tired like I should have been. That was the strange part. I felt edited, like someone had taken a piece of my night and cut it out cleanly. No rough edges, No memory scars. Just gone. I started the engine again. The sound felt louder this time. Too sharp in the silence. Outside, Route 9 stretched ahead like nothing had ever happened on it. But I didn't trust that anymore. Not after the woman. Not after the mirror. Not after the passenger seat that felt like it still remembered something I didn't. I drove slowly, eyes scanning every detail. Road signs passed normally. Trees stood still. Everything looked real enough to trust. But my mind kept circling the same question. Where did the missing time go? 10 minutes into driving, I noticed something small. A roadside marker. Metal pole, reflector strip. I remember passing it earlier tonight. But now it looked older. Rustier. Like it had aged while I wasn't looking. I slowed down. Looked again. The number on it was different. Not completely. Just slightly. Like someone had changed it while I wasn't paying attention. I felt my chest tighten. No, that's not possible, I muttered. I checked my GPS again. It refreshed automatically, then showed something that made my stomach drop. A detour route. One I had never selected. It showed my truck leaving Route 9, turning off onto a road that didn't exist on my mental map of this area. A road labeled simply, unmarked access path. I blinked hard. What road is that? I said out loud. No answer. Just engine hum. Just empty night. But the GPS insisted. It showed my truck traveling down that path for 11 minutes. Then stopping. Then returning to Route 9. Like nothing happened. But I knew nothing about it. I stared at the screen until my eyes hurt. Then I did something I shouldn't have. I replayed the dash cam again. Fast forward. My hands were shaking now, not from fear alone, but from frustration. Because something in me needed to understand what I lost. The footage loaded. My truck moving normally. Then suddenly, no transition. No warning. Just a shift. The road changed. Trees disappeared. The environment looked wrong. Like the camera was pointed at the same place, but not the same world. My breathing slowed without me realizing. In the footage, I was driving on a narrow road, surrounded by black open land. No lights. No highway signs. Just empty terrain. And something standing far ahead. Small. Still. Watching. I leaned closer. Where is this? I whispered. Then the footage zoomed slightly, autofocus adjustment. And I saw it clearly. The woman again. But this time not on the highway. Not in reflections. Here, on a road that shouldn't exist. Standing exactly in the center. Waiting for my truck. I felt my throat close. In the recording, I slowed down. My recorded self. Braking. Stopping. Then getting out. Again. I slammed pause. No, I didn't do this, I said quickly. But the footage didn't care. It showed me walking toward her. Same motion. Same empty obedience. Like I had done this before and forgot how many times. I turned the video off instantly. My heart was pounding now. Hard. Unsteady. I looked around the real road. Empty. Still Route 9. Still familiar. But my brain no longer trusted familiar things. I kept driving but slower. Careful. Watching for any shift in reality. That's when the radio clicked on again. Static first. Then her voice. Soft. Close. You left something behind. I froze. My hands tightened on the wheel. What did I leave? I asked before I could stop myself. Silence. Then, the part of you that turned around. A chill crawled through my spine. I looked at the rearview mirror instantly. Empty. But the feeling didn't leave. I kept driving. 10 more minutes passed. Or maybe more. Time was starting to feel unreliable. Like it was stretching in places it shouldn't. Then I saw something new on the GPS. Another gap. Another missing segment. But this one was longer. Much longer. 42 minutes. Gone. Completely unrecorded. I stopped the truck again. Pulled over hard. Dust rose around the tires. I turned everything off. Sat in silence. And tried to remember. I closed my eyes. Forced my mind backward. But there was nothing there. No darkness. No road. No sound. Just blank. Like someone had erased a film reel. Then replaced it with nothing. I opened my eyes fast. My breathing was uneven now. This is not normal, I whispered. I checked the mirrors again. Front, side, back, all empty. But I didn't feel alone anymore. That's the difference. You don't need to see something to know it's there. Sometimes you just feel the shape of it in your awareness. I reached for my phone. Opened notes. Typed. Time missing. GPS altered memory gaps. Then stopped. Because I realized something terrifying. If I was documenting this, then I already knew it would happen again. I was not recording the past. I was preparing for something I would forget. My hands started shaking harder. I deleted the note, then immediately regretted it. Because the moment I deleted it, my phone screen flickered. Just once, and for a split second, a reflection appeared on the black screen. Not mine. Behind me. Sitting. Patient. I dropped the phone instantly. It hit the seat and slid down. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't look back. Not yet. Because I wasn't sure I could survive what I might confirm. Instead, I slowly reached for the rearview mirror. Adjusted it slightly. Just enough to see. And there she was. Closer than before. Not smiling this time. Just watching. Like she was waiting for me to accept something. My voice came out thin. How long have you been in my truck? No answer. But the mirror shifted slightly. Like she leaned forward. And then something worse happened. The GPS chimed. New route loaded. Automatically. No input. No confirmation. Just selected. I looked down. The screen showed. Return path active. My stomach dropped. Because I never set a return path. And I don't remember ever leaving one. I turned the truck back on. Slowly. Hands weak now. The engine started. And as I pulled back onto Route 9, the radio whispered one last thing. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just calm enough to ruin me. You always come back the same way you left. And for the first time that night, I started wondering if I was actually driving forward, or just returning to something I had already forgotten how many times before. The GPS didn't restart when I turned the truck on. It reset, like it had been waiting for me. A new route appeared instantly. Same words again. Return path active. My throat tightened as I stared at it, because I wasn't sure anymore if I was driving towards something, or being sent back to it. The engine idled low. Too steady. too calm for what I was feeling inside. I kept my eyes on the road, but my mind was still stuck on the same thought. Missing hours, mirrors, the woman, the passenger seat that never felt empty anymore. And now this, a route that always returns. I pressed forward on Route 9 anyway, because stopping felt worse than moving. The night air outside looked normal again. Too normal, like nothing had ever happened on this road. But I knew better now. Normal is just what something looks like when it's hiding too well. I drove for maybe 10 minutes before I noticed something strange. A road sign, same one I had passed earlier tonight. Same scratch on the metal, same tilt. I slowed down slightly. My chest tightened. I already saw this, I whispered. But that made no sense. I should have been farther ahead by now. I checked the GPS. Still moving forward. Still correct. Still lying. That's when I felt it. A subtle pressure in the cab. Like the air had become heavier behind me. Not outside. Inside. I didn't look back right away. I told myself it was nothing. Fatigue. Stress. Long night shifts always mess with your senses. But then the radio clicked. Not static. Not voice. Just a soft shift in frequency. Like something had tuned itself in. And a sound came through. Breathing. Slow. Close. Behind me. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel instantly. No, I muttered under my breath. I kept driving. Eyes locked forward. Refusing to acknowledge what I already knew. Something was in the truck. Something that had been there longer than I wanted to admit. The rearview mirror trembled slightly. Not physically shaking. More like adjusting itself. Trying to show me something. I forced my gaze toward it. Slowly. Carefully. And my stomach dropped. The back seat wasn't empty. But it wasn't fully visible either. Just a shape. A presence where details refused to form properly. Like my eyes were being gently denied access. And then, it leaned forward. Just enough for the mirror to catch it fully. The woman, same as before, but closer than before. So close I felt like she wasn't sitting behind me. She was sitting inside the same space I was occupying. My breath hitched. I slammed my eyes forward immediately. Heart racing. Hands cold. But she didn't disappear. I could feel her. Not visually. Physically. Like pressure against the back of my seat. I whispered, "How long have you been here?" No answer. Only breathing. Matching mine. I kept driving. Because stopping felt like accepting something I wasn't ready to understand. The road ahead started to feel wrong again. Not visually. Emotionally. Like the night itself was repeating patterns I had already lived through. That's when I saw it. The same broken reflector post again. Exactly where it shouldn't be. I slammed the brakes slightly. Not fully. Just enough to confirm it. It was the same location. Same angle. Same rust. Same impossible repetition. I muttered I passed this twice. Then corrected myself. Or more. The GPS beeped softly. New notification. History sync complete. I froze. What does that mean? I asked out loud. The screen didn't answer, but it updated anyway. A full log appeared. Trips, routes, shifts, dates. My stomach tightened as I read the top entry. Shift 18. Wait, I don't remember 18 shifts. I scrolled down. Shift 17. Shift 16. Shift 15. All Route 9. All night shifts. All incomplete memories. My breathing became uneven. No, no way, I whispered. I scrolled further. Each shift looked the same. Same route. Same missing segments. Same gaps. But one detail changed everything. Passenger detected. Every single entry. My hand froze mid-scroll. I stared at the screen. Passenger detected. I never had passengers. I work alone. Always alone. I looked at the back seat again through the mirror. She was still there, watching, patient, like she had been waiting for me to notice the pattern. My voice cracked. What are you? No answer, but the pressure in the cab increased, like the air itself leaned closer. I pulled the truck to the side of the road again. Hard. The tires scraped gravel. Dust rose into the headlights. I turned off the engine. Silence fell instantly. Too fast. Too complete. And in that silence, I heard something I wish I hadn't. My own voice. From the back seat. Calm. Soft. You always bring me home. My blood went cold. I turned slowly. Very slowly. And for the first time, I saw her clearly. Not in a mirror. Not in reflection. Right there. Sitting behind me. Perfectly still. Looking at me like I was the one who didn't belong in the truck anymore. My lips trembled. I don't remember taking you anywhere, I said. She tilted her head slightly, like she found that interesting. Then she leaned forward just a little, and something in my memory cracked. A flash. Bright headlights. Same road. Different night. Me opening the passenger door. Inviting someone in. Sorry. But my brain rejected it instantly. No, I whispered, that's not real. She didn't react. Instead, she pointed forward again. Same gesture as before. Toward the road. And this time, I understood something I didn't want to. It wasn't a direction. It was a cycle. A loop. A return. My hands shook as I turned the ignition back on. Engine started slower now, like it didn't want to cooperate. I looked forward. The road stretched out ahead. Normal. Familiar. Too familiar. Like I had already driven it 100 times. Maybe more. The GPS blinked again. Return path confirmed. I laughed once. Small. Broken. Because I finally realized something terrifying. The missing hours weren't missing. They were repeating. And I was the only one who forgot. I drove forward again. Not because I wanted to, but because I had no idea how to stop something I couldn't remember starting. Behind me, I felt her settle back into the seat. Like she was comfortable now. Like this was home. And as the truck moved deeper into Route 9 again, the radio turned on one last time. Not static. Not warning. Just a soft, familiar voice saying, "Welcome back to the same night." And that's when I finally understood. I wasn't driving home. I was already there. The cabin was already lit when I arrived. That was the first thing that felt wrong. I hadn't even stepped out of the car yet, but I could see it through the trees, warm yellow light spilling from the windows like someone had been waiting for me. Like I was late to something I never agreed to attend. The road behind me was already swallowed by fog. No signal. No passing cars. just the slow ticking sound of my engine cooling down. I stared at the cabin and whispered, this place was supposed to be empty. But it was, and somehow I knew that before I even confirmed it. I got out slowly. Gravel under my shoes sounded too loud in the silence. Every step felt like it was being recorded by the forest. The air here was different. Not cold exactly. More like it hadn't been disturbed in a long time. Like breath hadn't touched it properly in years. I checked my phone again. No signal. Of course, that was part of the reason I chose this place. No people. No noise. No connection. Just space to think. But standing here now, I wasn't thinking. I was listening. Because the cabin wasn't quiet. It was waiting quiet. There's a difference. I walked closer. The wooden steps creaked under my weight. Fresh wood smell hit me. Too fresh. Like someone had repaired this place recently. But the listing said abandoned for years. I paused at the door, and that's when I saw it. A small brass plate beside the frame. It read, KEPD Warm 4 Guest. The grammar was wrong. That should have been my first clue to leave. But instead, I just stood there. Because I kept thinking about what the owner said on the phone. His voice was too calm. Too rehearsed. You'll find everything ready, he told me. I keep it warm for the ones who need quiet. I remember laughing a little. I thought he meant heating. Electricity. Maintenance. Now I wasn't so sure. I pushed the door open. It wasn't locked. That was the second thing I didn't like. The inside smelled like wood smoke. Like a fire had been burning recently. But the fireplace was cold. Completely cold. Yet the air inside was. It felt lived in. I stepped inside. Slowly. Listening. Waiting for something to move. Nothing did. But silence in here felt layered. Like it had depth. Like other sounds were underneath it, just out of reach. I dropped my bag near the couch. It landed softly. Too softly. Like something absorbed the impact. I looked around. Everything was clean. Too clean. Not hotel clean. More like someone had been carefully maintaining a memory. I walked toward the kitchen. No dust. No clutter. A kettle on the stove. Full. My stomach tightened slightly. I didn't leave that there, I said quietly. I opened the lid. Cold water. Not recently boiled. But the kettle itself was warm. I pulled my hand back instantly. That shouldn't have been possible. I turned off the stove knob without thinking. Click. Too loud. The sound echoed longer than it should have. I stood there staring at it. Then something small changed. The silence shifted. Not broken. Just adjusted. Like the house had noticed me noticing. I slowly walked back to the living room. That's when I saw the chair. It was facing the window. Perfectly centered. Like someone had been watching the road before I arrived. I didn't remember putting it there. But I also didn't remember moving it. I told myself I was tired. That I was imagining structure in randomness. But my body didn't believe me. Because my body was already reacting to something my mind hadn't accepted yet. I checked the windows. Outside, fog pressed against the glass. Thick. Alive looking. Then I noticed footprints. Outside. Leading from the trees. Toward the cabin. I leaned closer. There were two sets. One fresh. One older. Both leading in. But only one leading out. I swallowed hard. No, I whispered, that's not possible. I stepped back from the window. My reflection lingered in the glass, a second longer than I did. That made me stop breathing for a moment. I turned away quickly. Focus, logic, reason. That's what I needed. I pulled out my phone again. Opened the booking email. Read it carefully. Name of host, Daniel Harker. Instructions, cabin will be warm upon arrival. I didn't like that phrasing anymore. Warm wasn't a standard detail. It was intentional. I checked the timestamp of the email. It had been sent at 3:12 a.m., but I booked it at 11 p.m. That meant the confirmation came after I already booked it. I stared at the screen, confusion building under my skin like pressure. That's when I heard something upstairs. A soft sound, like wood shifting under weight. I froze, slowly tilted my head. Listening. Nothing. Then again. A single step. Above me. I didn't move. My mind tried to explain it instantly. Wind. Old house settling. Animals. But none of those explanations carried weight in a place like this. I stepped toward the stairs. Each step I took felt louder than the last. The house didn't creak under me. It responded, like it was aware of where I was. Halfway up I stopped, because I realized something. The upstairs light was on. I hadn't turned it on. I reached the top slowly. The hallway stretched ahead. 3 doors, all slightly open, all releasing the same warm air. I walked forward, heart steady but wrong. Too steady, like fear hadn't fully arrived yet. First door, bathroom, empty, sink running slightly, dripping. Second door, bedroom, bed perfectly made, but the pillow had a slight dent, like someone had just stood up from it. Third door, end of hallway, door fully open, light spilling out. I didn't want to go closer, but I did, because something in me already knew I would. I stepped forward, slow, controlled, and stopped at the doorway. The room was empty, but the air was. It felt occupied. I looked around carefully. Closet slightly open, curtains moving just a little. Then I saw the guest book on the nightstand. Open, fresh ink, 1 entry, only one. It read, "We kept it warm for you. You always come back when it's cold." My stomach dropped. I stepped back instantly. My foot hit something. I looked down. A suitcase. Not mine, but identical to mine. Same color. Same scratches. Same broken zipper. I hadn't brought it upstairs. I hadn't even unpacked yet. My breathing got shallow. I backed out of the room quickly. Then I saw something at the end of the hallway. The chair. The same chair from downstairs. Now placed here, facing me. And for a moment, I swear it was already occupied. But when I blinked, it was empty again. The house settled. Not loudly. Not violently. Just like it had finished acknowledging me. And then the warmth inside the cabin shifted slightly. Like something inside it had decided. I was staying longer than I planned. And somewhere in the dark behind me, something quietly agreed. I didn't sleep that night. Not even for a minute. Because every time I closed my eyes, I felt like the house was changing its position around me. Not moving, just rearranging itself while I wasn't looking. At around 3, 8:40 a.m., I gave up pretending I could rest. I got up, grabbed my jacket, and decided I needed air. Outside air. Real air. The kind that doesn't feel like it's watching you breathe. The cabin was silent when I opened the door. Too silent. Even the wood didn't creak this time, like it had learned my weight. The fog was thicker than before. It wasn't just covering the forest now. It was pressing into it, like it wanted to become part of the trees. I stepped out carefully. The cold hit my face instantly. Sharp. Clean. Almost too clean. I exhaled slowly, watching my breath disappear. And that's when I saw it. Footprints. Right in front of the cabin steps. I froze, because I hadn't made them. And there had been no one else. At least, no one I could remember. I stepped closer slowly. My boots sank slightly into the snow. Fresh layer. Soft crunch under every movement. The footprints were clear. Human. Barely deep enough to suggest weight, but definitely recent. They led away from the cabin. Down the slope. Into the trees. I knelt down, heart tightening a little. The edges of the prints were still sharp. Not hours old. Minutes. Maybe less. I whispered, "That's not possible." Because I hadn't heard anything. No doors. No movement. No sound at all inside the cabin. I followed the trail with my eyes. It didn't wander. It didn't hesitate. It just left. Straight line into the forest. Like whoever made them already knew exactly where they were going. Then I noticed something that made my stomach tighten harder. There was only one set of footprints. Not two. Not even overlapping ones. Just a single line. Like someone walking alone. But what made it worse was that they stopped just before the trees. I stood there for a moment, unsure if I should even move. The snow around the cabin was untouched except for that path. Everything else looked erased by wind. But the footprints were too clean. Too deliberate. Like they were placed there instead of made. I took a step forward. Then another. Slow. Careful. Every crunch of snow felt louder than it should have. The forest ahead looked darker than before. Not because of light. Because of density. Like it was filling itself in as I watched it. I followed the trail. The cabin disappeared behind me quickly. Too quickly. Fog swallowed it almost immediately, like it didn't want to be seen anymore. I kept walking, because stopping felt worse than moving. The footprints led down a narrow slope between trees. Branches hung low, heavy with snow. One of them brushed my shoulder. I flinched instantly, then felt stupid for reacting. But fear doesn't care about logic. It reacts before thought. The deeper I went, the quieter everything became. Not peaceful quiet. Wrong quiet. Even the wind stopped trying. That's when I noticed something strange. My footsteps behind me were delayed. I stopped walking. Listened. Silence. Then one extra crunch. Late. Like something was copying me a second too slow. I spun around fast. Nothing there. Just fog and trees. I forced myself to breathe. "You're just tired," I muttered. But my voice didn't sound convinced. I turned back. The footprints were still there. Still leading forward. But now I noticed something new. They were changing slightly. At first, normal human shape. Then narrower. Then slightly uneven. Like the person walking was adjusting their balance. Or learning how to walk properly. I stopped again. My chest tightened. "Okay, no," I said quietly. I crouched closer. The prints were still fresh, but now they looked almost repeated, as if the same step had been placed again, in slightly different positions. I followed them further. The trees grew denser, snow deeper, the air colder, and then I saw something that made me stop completely. A second set of footprints, but they were wrong. They were walking toward the cabin, backwards, no clear heel direction, just impressions pointing the opposite way. I looked between both trails, one going away, one coming back, but neither met. They didn't connect, like two people who never crossed paths, except there was no second person. I swallowed hard. "This doesn't make sense," I whispered. Then I noticed something even worse. The returning footprints were fresher. I backed up slightly. My heart started beating faster now, because I realized something I didn't want to accept. Whatever made these prints was still here, somewhere between leaving and returning. I stood there scanning the forest, waiting, listening. Nothing moved, but the silence felt occupied. Then, a soft crunch behind me. I turned instantly. Nothing, only fog, but the sound had been real. I turned back toward the trail, and the footprints had changed again. Now they weren't going forward or backward. They were circling around me. Slowly, I stepped back instinctively. Snow crunched under my heel, and I heard it again. Another step, behind me, but delayed, like a shadow learning timing. I turned fast. Still nothing, but my breath was getting heavier now. The air felt thinner, like the forest was slowly removing space around me. I whispered, "Who's there?" Silence answered. Then, from deeper in the trees, a single footprint appeared, fresh, right in front of me. No movement, no sound of approach, just there, as if it had always been there, and I just hadn't noticed. I stepped back again. The forest didn't react, but the footprints did. They multiplied, slowly, one by one, appearing around me in a loose circle. Not random, not chaotic, intentional. I felt my chest tighten hard. No, 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 no. I turned sharply toward the cabin. It looked far away now. Too far, like the forest had stretched distance while I wasn't looking. I started walking back quickly, snow crunching faster now. Behind me, the footprints followed. Not physically, but visually. They were rearranging themselves to match my pace. Always slightly behind. Always delayed. Like something was trying to learn how I moved. My breathing got louder. Fog thickened between the trees. The cabin was barely visible now. Just a faint shape in white distance. I forced myself to move faster. Then I heard it. A step, right behind me. Perfectly timed this time. No delay. I froze. Didn't turn. Couldn't turn. Because I knew if I did, I would understand something I wasn't ready for. Instead, I looked down, at the snow beneath my feet. One set of prints. Mine, but beside them, another set, exactly matching, walking with me, same pace, same direction, same rhythm, except I wasn't the one making them. My throat went dry instantly. I whispered without meaning to. I was never alone out here. The second set of prints didn't stop. Neither did mine. And somewhere in the fog behind me, something finally learned how to walk exactly like I do. The door was already unlocked. I know I locked it. I remember pulling it shut, hearing the click, feeling the small finality of it. But now my hand was on the handle, and it turned without resistance. No creak, no warning, just silence giving way. I stood there at the top of the stairs for a long moment, staring at the door like it might explain itself if I waited long enough. It didn't. The house, however, felt different again. Heavier, like it had shifted its attention upstairs. I whispered, I didn't open this room. But saying it out loud didn't help. It made it worse, because now it sounded like a confession instead of a statement. I pushed the door slowly. It opened inward. Warm air spilled out immediately. Not normal room temperature warmth. No, this was living warmth. Like someone had just stepped out, or just decided to stay hidden. The first thing I saw was the bed. Perfectly made. No wrinkles. No folds. But the pillow had a dent. Fresh. Not decorative. Not accidental. A real pressure mark. Like someone had been lying there, watching the door. My throat tightened. I never came in here, I whispered again. But my voice felt weak now. Uncertain. I stepped inside. The carpet felt softer than downstairs. Too soft. Like it had been replaced recently. I looked around slowly. The curtains were slightly open. Not fully. Just enough for the fog outside to bleed into the room in thin gray strands. And then I noticed something that made my stomach tight. A glass of water, half full, on the nightstand, still clear, no dust on it, no condensation running down the sides, like it had been placed there moments ago. My hand moved toward it without me fully deciding, then stopped. I pulled back. No, I muttered, because I didn't trust anything in this room. Not anymore. I looked at the wardrobe next. Slightly open. Just a crack. Enough for darkness to sit inside it properly. I stepped closer. Each step felt heavier than the last. Like the room was reacting to my movement. When I reached the wardrobe, I hesitated. My hand hovered. Then I pulled it open. Empty, but not truly empty, because something about the space inside felt compressed, like air had been displaced recently. I stepped back fast, my heart rate rising now. I looked around again, trying to find something normal, something explainable, but everything in here looked staged. Not messy, not abandoned, staged. Then I saw it. A second glass of water. On the desk, next to a chair I hadn't noticed before. I froze. That chair was not there when I entered. I swear it was. Now it faced the window, exactly like the chair downstairs. I stepped closer slowly. The glass was untouched, but the surface had a faint ripple in it, like something had just stopped drinking from it. My breathing got shallow. I whispered hello. Silence answered, but not the empty kind, the waiting kind. Then, the chair creaked. Once, soft, barely audible. My entire body locked instantly. I didn't move. I didn't breathe, because I knew one thing clearly now. The house was no longer empty. Something was matching my presence. I slowly stepped back toward the door. But the moment I did, I heard something behind me. Not footsteps, not movement. Breathing. Slow. Controlled. Close. I turned instantly. Nothing. Just the bed. Just the room. But the air felt different now, like someone had stepped out of my blind spot and decided to stay just outside my sight range. I backed toward the hallway. My hand reached for the door frame, but then I saw something that made my chest drop. The guest book, still open on the nightstand, but now there was a second entry beneath the first one. Fresh ink, still slightly wet. I stepped forward again against my instincts. I had to read it. I had to know. The words were simple, but they didn't feel written. They felt placed. It said, "You always check the locked room last." My stomach twisted instantly. "No," I whispered, because I didn't remember that. I didn't remember any pattern like that. But my body did something strange. It accepted it. Like part of me recognized it before my mind did. I backed away from the book slowly. And that's when I noticed something worse. The water glass on the nightstand had moved. Just slightly. Closer to the edge. Like someone had just lifted it and set it down again. My pulse started pounding harder now. I turned toward the hallway. The door behind me slowly began to close. Not slamming, not rushing, just closing, patiently, like it had done this before. I stepped forward fast, grabbed the edge, stopped it, but when I looked up, the room looked different. The bed was no longer perfectly made. The pillow was slightly disturbed, more than before, like someone had just gotten up again. My breathing turned uneven. "I didn't see anyone," I whispered, but my voice cracked at the end. I stepped fully out into the hallway, and then I saw something I shouldn't have. Footprints inside the room, not on the floor outside. Inside, leading from the bed, to the chair, to the wardrobe, and then stopping, right behind where I had been standing. My entire body went cold, because I realized something I didn't want to accept. Whatever was in there was not moving around the room. It was moving around me. I turned off the hallway light instinctively. Darkness swallowed the room behind me. But even in the dark, I felt it, still there, still aware. I started backing down the stairs slowly, each step careful, controlled, trying not to make sound. But halfway down, I heard the door upstairs click open again. I stopped immediately. Didn't turn. Couldn't turn. Because I knew what I would see. Instead, I just listened. And then I heard it. A chair dragging slightly across the floor. Slow. Deliberate. Then stopping. Right at the doorway. My hands started shaking. And then, a voice. Not loud. Not close. Just perfectly clear. Behind me. In the hallway upstairs. "You checked everything, except what stays after you leave." My breath stopped completely, because I realized something worse than fear. The room wasn't the problem. I was, and whatever had been staying there, had learned exactly how I move when I think I'm alone. The guest book was open again. I hadn't touched it. I swear I hadn't. But it was sitting right there on the nightstand when I came back upstairs, like it had been waiting for me to notice it again. Same page, same position, except now there were more entries. I didn't even hear the stairs creak this time. That's what scared me the most, because I know I walked up. I remember every step, but the house didn't react to me, like I wasn't heavy enough to matter anymore. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, just staring at the book. Something in my chest kept telling me not to read it. but something else quieter, more familiar, told me I already had. I stepped closer slowly. The air in the room felt warmer again. Too warm, like someone had just left it. I looked at the bed first. Still disturbed. Same dent in the pillow. But now the blanket was slightly pulled down. Just enough to show the mattress underneath. Like someone had gotten up recently and didn't bother fixing it. My throat tightened. "No," I whispered. "I didn't come back in here." But even saying it felt weak now. Like I was arguing with a memory that didn't belong to me anymore. I forced my eyes to the guest book. My hand hovered over it for a second. Then I flipped the page, and I stopped breathing. There were entries, more than before. Not just one, several. But the strangest part wasn't the number. It was the handwriting. All of it looked recent. Ink still dark. No fading. No aging. Like someone had been writing in this book just moments ago. I leaned closer. The first entry was simple. Day 1, the cabin is quiet, too quiet. I think someone else is here with me. My stomach tightened instantly. I whispered, "That's not me." But the handwriting, it felt familiar. Not in a visual way. In a muscle memory way. Like my hand had done it before my mind agreed. I turned the page slowly. Second entry. Day 2, I locked the upstairs room. I don't know why I did it, but I think it was already locked before I arrived. My breath became uneven. I stepped back slightly, because I didn't lock any upstairs room. I only saw it today. I stopped that thought immediately, because it felt like I was about to lose something important inside my own head. I flipped again. Third entry. Day 3. The house changes when I stop looking at it. I think it remembers me better than I do. My fingers went cold. The room suddenly felt smaller. Like the walls had leaned in slightly while I was reading. I forced myself to continue. Fourth entry. Day 4. I found footprints in the snow. They lead away from me when I stay still, but when I move, they follow. My stomach dropped, because I remembered that. I remember. No, I didn't. I pressed my hand against my forehead, trying to steady myself, trying to separate memory from suggestion. But the problem was, I couldn't tell which one was real anymore. I turned the page again, and froze completely, because this entry was different, not just in content, in tone. The handwriting was shakier, more rushed, like whoever wrote it was afraid of being watched while writing. Day 5. I think the cabin keep people. It keeps versions of them. I stopped leaving a long time ago. My heart hammered instantly. I stepped back from the book. My heel hit the floor too hard. The sound echoed longer than it should have. The room responded. Not loudly, just subtly, like it acknowledged the noise. I swallowed hard. "No," I muttered again. "This is just notes, old notes. Someone stayed here before me." But even as I said it, I didn't believe it. I looked back at the book and noticed something that made my skin go cold. The ink on the last entry was still moving slightly. Not drying, not fading, moving, like it had just been written. Right now, in real time. I froze. My eyes locked on the page. And then, another line appeared beneath it, slowly forming, letter by letter. I didn't touch the book. I didn't move. But the words kept forming anyway. Day 6, you are reading this out of order. My breath stopped completely. My body went rigid because I hadn't seen a day 5 before day 6. And I definitely hadn't written day 6. The words continued forming. I always read the book when I come back upstairs. My hands started shaking. I whispered, "No, I don't come back upstairs." But the ink didn't stop. It kept writing. I always think I'm seeing it for the first time. I stepped away from the nightstand slowly, my eyes never leaving the page. The room felt wrong now. Not haunted, not even alive. More like aware of itself through me. I turned toward the door, but something stopped me. The chair. It was facing me again, right in the middle of the room. I hadn't heard it move, but it was here, watching, waiting, and this time, it felt occupied. I didn't look away from it, because I was afraid it would change if I blinked. The guest book behind me made a soft sound, a page turning on its own. I flinched slightly but didn't turn, because I already knew what I would see. Still, I heard it. Ink scratching, writing continuing. The voice in my head that didn't feel like mine anymore whispered one thought. What if you are just another entry? I shook my head immediately. No, I whispered out loud. I'm real. But the room didn't respond. Instead, the chair creaked. Once, slow, deliberate, like it was adjusting its attention toward me. I backed toward the door, step by step, careful, controlled. But the moment my hand touched the door frame, I heard something behind me. Not footsteps, not movement. A voice, very close, calm, familiar. You always leave before finishing the book. I froze because I recognized that voice. Not from the house, from myself. My throat tightened instantly. I didn't turn. I couldn't. Instead, I asked quietly, "What is this place?" Silence answered first. Then the guest book spoke again. Not physically, but through my thoughts, like the words were being placed inside me instead of read. This is where you come when you forget. My breathing became uneven. I don't forget things, I said. But even I knew that wasn't true anymore. The missing hours, the repeated routes, the footprints that matched my steps before I made them, the chair that always faced me, the house that warmed itself before I arrived. None of it made sense. Unless I had been here before. Many times, I stepped out into the hallway quickly, almost stumbling. The moment I left the room, the warmth behind me dropped instantly, like something had been disconnected. I turned just once. The room looked normal again. Still, silent, empty, but the guest book, I could still see it. And for a second, I swear there was a second name written beneath mine. Faint, almost invisible, but familiar enough to make my stomach twist, like I had seen it somewhere before I ever came here. I shut the door quickly, too quickly, and as it clicked shut, something inside the cabin shifted. Not loudly, not violently, just like it had finished recognizing me again, and decided I was still part of the schedule. Downstairs, something creaked, slowly, like the house was preparing for my next entry, even though I hadn't decided to go anywhere yet. I was already downstairs when I realized I never decided to go downstairs. That thought hit me halfway through the staircase. My hand was on the railing, but I couldn't remember placing it there. I stopped. Instantly, the cabin was silent again, but not the same silence from before. This one felt structured, like something inside the house had settled into a rhythm, a routine, a life. I looked back up the stairs. The hallway above was empty, but the light in the upstairs room was still on. Warm, steady, like it was expecting me to return. I whispered I didn't choose to come down. My voice sounded thin in the wooden space. The cabin didn't answer, but the air changed slightly, like it had heard me. I stood there for a moment, trying to remember the exact reason I left the room upstairs. Guest book, chair, breathing behind me. Something about the book, but the memory felt slippery now, like it belonged to someone who only looked like me. I stepped off the last stair. The floorboards didn't creak. That was new. They always creaked before. Now they were quiet. Too quiet. Like they had learned my weight. I walked toward the living room slowly. Every step felt pre-approved, like the cabin expected me to be exactly where I was going. Then I saw the chair. It was downstairs again, facing the fireplace, perfectly centered, just like before. But this time, it was already occupied. I stopped breathing instantly, not because I saw someone clearly, but because I didn't. And still I knew. There was a shape there, a pressure in the air that refused to resolve into something visible. Like my eyes had been told not to finish the image. I whispered, "Who's there?" Silence. Then the fire in the fireplace flickered, even though there was no fire. No wood. No source. Just movement in empty space. I stepped back slowly. My heel hit something soft. I looked down. A suitcase. Mine. Same scratches. Same broken zipper. Same stain on the corner I never cleaned. But I hadn't brought it downstairs. I hadn't even opened it upstairs. My stomach tightened. "No," I said under my breath. The suitcase wasn't just placed here. It looked used, like it had been opened recently. I crouched down slowly. My fingers hovered over the zipper, and I swear, it twitched, just slightly, like something inside reacted to me. I pulled my hand back instantly. My heart was beating too fast now, too aware. The cabin wasn't just remembering me anymore. It was organizing me. I stood up quickly and turned toward the kitchen. I needed distance, space, anything that wasn't this room. But the kitchen was worse, because the kettle was on again. Boiling, soft steam rising. I didn't turn it on. I didn't even touch it. I stepped closer carefully. The sound of boiling water filled the room like someone was cooking something unseen. I reached for the handle. It was hot, freshly hot. I pulled my hand back fast. "That's impossible," I whispered. Behind me, a floorboard creaked upstairs. Slow, deliberate, like someone had just stepped out of the room. I froze. Then another sound. Not upstairs this time. Behind me. The living room chair shifted slightly. Just a small movement, but enough to confirm something I didn't want confirmed. There was more than one presence in the cabin. I turned slowly. The chair was now angled slightly toward me. Not fully, just enough, like it had adjusted its attention. My throat went dry. I said, "I'm leaving." But even as I said it, I knew I was. Because my feet didn't move toward the door. They moved toward the hallway. Upstairs, my body was doing something my mind hadn't approved. I stopped halfway. My chest tightened. "What are you doing?" I whispered to myself. No answer from me. Just the cabin, softly adjusting again. The upstairs light flickered once, then stabilized, like a signal, like permission. I swallowed hard and forced myself toward the stairs. Each step felt heavier than the last. Not physically heavier, emotionally heavier. Like I was walking into a decision I had already made before forgetting it. Halfway up, I heard it again. Breathing, but not behind me this time. Ahead, inside the hallway. I stopped instantly, listened. The breathing was calm, controlled, familiar, like it belonged here more than I did. I whispered, "You're still here." No response, but the air tightened slightly. I reached the top of the stairs slowly. The hallway was unchanged. 3 doors, guestbook room at the end. But something was different. The middle door was now closed. I remember it being open. I'm sure of it. I stepped forward carefully. The floor felt warmer under my feet, like heat was coming from inside the walls. I reached for the middle door handle. It turned instantly. Unlocked. Of course. I pushed it open and froze. The room inside wasn't empty, but it wasn't occupied by a person either. It was occupied by signs of living. Fresh, immediate. The bed was unmade now. Completely. Like someone had just gotten up seconds ago. The window was open slightly, curtains moving gently in cold air. And on the nightstand, a second glass of water, half full, still warm. My stomach dropped. I whispered this room wasn't like this, but my voice didn't sound confident anymore. It sounded corrected, like I was arguing with something that already had proof. Then I saw something on the wall, a shadow, not moving, not fully formed, just present, standing exactly where a person would stand if they were watching the bed. My breathing slowed without my permission. I stepped inside and immediately regretted it, because the room felt lived in, not abandoned, not haunted, occupied. I looked at the bed again. There was a dent in the mattress, fresh, still holding shape. I backed away slowly, and that's when I noticed the most disturbing detail yet. There were 2 sets of footprints on the floor, one going toward the bed, one going away, but both were mine. Same size, same shape, same boots. I froze. My voice cracked. I was already here. The shadow on the wall shifted slightly, not moving away, just adjusting, like it had acknowledged me. I stepped back into the hallway fast. My heart was hammering now. The guestbook room door at the end of the hall was slightly open again. I hadn't touched it, but it was open, waiting. And as I stood there, I realized something I didn't want to understand. The cabin wasn't abandoned. It never was. It was occupied in layers, by versions of me I couldn't remember becoming. And somewhere inside this house, one of them was still awake. The silence was the first thing I noticed. Not the normal kind. Not peaceful. Not comforting. This silence felt arranged, like the building was holding its breath around me. I remember standing in the hallway outside apartment 4C with my suitcase still in my hand, staring at the long, narrow corridor stretching in both directions. No voices, no televisions, no footsteps above me. Nothing, just pale yellow lights humming softly overhead. The landlord had smiled when he handed me the keys downstairs. Old man, thin face, gray sweater. He kept repeating the same sentence. "You'll sleep well here." At the time, I thought he meant the area was quiet. Now I think he meant something else. The lock clicked open. The apartment smelled clean. Too clean. Not fresh paint, not dust. Just empty air. Like no one had breathed inside for a very long time. I stepped in slowly. The floorboards didn't creak. The windows were already closed. The kitchen light was already on. And the bedroom door at the end of the hall stood slightly open. Waiting. I don't know why that bothered me so much. Maybe because I clearly remembered seeing the landlord lock the apartment earlier when he showed it to me. Everything had been shut then. Everything. But now the bedroom door was open 3 inches exactly. I pushed it wider. The room inside was small but neat. A single bed. White curtains. A closet against the wall. And one thing that immediately felt wrong. There was a glass of water on the bedside table. Half full. I froze for a second. Then laughed nervously. Probably maintenance workers, I whispered to myself. But even then, my voice sounded strange inside the apartment. Soft. Swallowed. Like the walls absorbed sound instead of reflecting it. I walked to the window and looked outside. Snow drifted slowly through the streetlights below. The city looked far away from here. Muted. The building sat on the edge of the older part of town, where everything seemed forgotten after dark. I should have left that night. Honestly, I think part of me wanted to. But I was tired. And tired people ignore instincts all the time. That's how places like this keep you. I unpacked slowly. Tried to make noise on purpose. Zippers. Closet doors. Running water. Anything. But every sound died too quickly. Like the apartment hated interruption. Around midnight, I made coffee and sat at the small kitchen table. That's when I noticed something strange. I couldn't hear the refrigerator. No humming. No pipes. Nothing. The entire building felt disconnected from life itself. I stared at the ceiling for a while, waiting for footsteps from another tenant. Nothing came. Then suddenly, a sound, very faint, above me, a chair scraping across the floor. I sat up immediately. Relief hit me first. Finally, another person, another normal sound. But the relief didn't last long, because a few seconds later, I remembered something the landlord mentioned earlier. There's no 5th floor anymore. I slowly looked upward. The scraping sound came again. Long, slow, directly overhead. My coffee suddenly tasted bitter. I stood and moved toward the hallway. The apartment seemed darker now, even though every light was still on. I checked the front door. Locked. Then I noticed something else. The bedroom door had closed again. I stopped moving. I knew I left it open. I remember that clearly because I kept glancing toward the room while sitting in the kitchen. Now it sat perfectly shut. I whispered, "Okay," like saying something calm would make the feeling disappear. It didn't. The silence around me felt tighter now. Aware, I stepped toward the bedroom slowly. The carpet beneath my feet softened my steps until I almost felt like I was floating through the apartment. My hand reached the doorknob. Cold metal. I pushed the door open carefully. The room looked normal. Still, empty. But the glass of water was gone. I stared at the nightstand. Nothing there now. No ring from condensation. No mark. Nothing. Like it had never existed. My chest tightened slowly. I stepped inside. The air felt colder than before. I checked the closet next. Empty. But there was a smell now. Faint, like old perfume trapped inside fabric. I backed away immediately. And then I heard it. A soft knock. 3 taps. Coming from the wall beside my bed. I froze. Another knock answered from farther away. Then another. Moving through the walls. Apartment to apartment. Like someone walking through the building without using the hallways. I listened carefully. The knocks continued. Slow, patient, never loud. Then they stopped directly beside me. Silence again. I whispered hello. Nothing answered. But a second later, the bathroom light turned off. My heart jumped hard enough to hurt. I stared down the hallway. The bathroom sat in darkness now. I knew I left that light on. I remembered it clearly. I walked toward it slowly, every step feeling heavier. The hallway suddenly looked longer than before. I know that sounds impossible, but it did. The shadows near the bathroom seemed stretched. Wrong somehow. I reached the doorway. Inside, everything looked normal. Sink, mirror, shower curtain. But the mirror had fog on it. Fresh fog, like someone had taken a hot shower seconds ago. I stopped breathing for a moment, because I hadn't used hot water yet. Very slowly, words began appearing in the fog. Not dramatically, not like a movie, just lines forming naturally as condensation shifted. 4 simple words. Keep your voice low. I stumbled backward instantly. My shoulder hit the hallway wall hard. The fogged mirror remained perfectly still afterward, like the message had always been there. I stared at it, trying to think rationally, trying to explain it. But deep down, another feeling had already started growing. The feeling that this apartment wasn't empty before I arrived. It was occupied by silence itself. And silence here had rules. I turned away from the bathroom quickly, went straight to the front door. I grabbed the handle, twisted, locked. Good. But when I looked through the peephole, the hallway outside was darker now. Only one overhead light remained on, and standing beneath it was someone facing my door. Still, motionless. I couldn't make out a face, just a dark figure. Tall, thin, one arm hanging strangely lower than the other. I held my breath automatically. The figure didn't knock, didn't move, didn't even seem human enough to breathe. Then slowly, the hallway light above them flickered once, and the figure was suddenly closer to my door than before. Not walking, not moving, just closer. Like distance inside the building didn't behave properly. I stepped back from the peephole immediately. My pulse pounded in my ears now. The apartment behind me stayed perfectly silent. Too silent, as if the entire building was listening to hear whether I would make noise next. The breathing started at exactly 2:14 in the morning. I know the time because I hadn't slept yet. I was sitting on the edge of the bed with the lamp on, staring at the wall beside me, trying not to think about the figure outside my door. At some point, the hallway had gone completely dark. Even through the peephole, there was nothing now. No light, no movement, just blackness pressed against the other side of the door. That should have comforted me. Instead, it felt worse, because now I didn't know if the figure had left or simply stepped closer. I remember rubbing my eyes hard, telling myself I was exhausted, New apartment. Stress. Lack of sleep. The human brain does strange things in silence. That's what I kept repeating. Then I heard it. A slow inhale. Right beside me. I froze instantly. Not imagination. Not pipes. Breathing. Soft. Patient. Coming from inside the wall next to my bed. I turned my head slowly. The sound stopped immediately. The apartment became silent again. I waited. Nothing. Then, after a few seconds, exhale. Long. Quiet. Like someone resting their forehead against the other side of the wall. My chest tightened. I slid off the bed carefully. Every movement suddenly felt dangerous. I stepped closer to the wall. The wallpaper looked old now that I was near it. Faint stains beneath the pale paint. Hairline cracks. Tiny marks that almost looked like fingernail scratches. I leaned in slightly. The breathing returned. Closer this time. Matching my distance. My mouth went dry. I whispered hello. Silence. Then 3 soft taps answered from inside the wall. Not loud. Not violent. Just acknowledgement. My entire body went cold. I stumbled backward immediately. Because I remembered something important. The landlord told me apartment 4B next door was empty. Hasn't been rented in years, he said casually earlier that evening. I looked toward the shared wall again. The breathing had stopped, but now the silence felt intentional. Listening. I grabbed my phone quickly and checked the time again. 2:17 a.m. No signal. Not even one bar. I frowned. That didn't make sense. I had service earlier. I walked toward the living room window. Still no signal. The snow outside fell harder now, covering the street in pale white layers. The city lights seemed farther away tonight. Almost unreal. Then, a sound from the bedroom. The bed springs creaked softly, like someone had just sat down. I stopped breathing. The apartment suddenly felt occupied. Not haunted. Occupied. I stared down the hallway toward the bedroom door. Darkness filled the room beyond it now. I didn't remember turning the lamp off. Slowly, carefully, I walked back. The carpet softened my steps again, until I barely made noise. I reached the bedroom doorway and looked inside. The lamp was still on, but dimmer somehow. And the bed, the blanket had been pulled back slightly, like someone had been lying there moments ago. I whispered no. The breathing returned immediately, closer than before, right beside my ear this time. I spun around fast. Nothing behind me. But the wall sounded hollow now. Not solid, like there was space inside it. A hidden space. The breathing continued softly through the plaster. Steady. Human. I pressed my hand against the wall before thinking. Warm. My stomach dropped instantly. Walls shouldn't feel warm in winter, especially not in an old building like this. I pulled my hand away fast, and then I noticed something else. There was moisture on the wallpaper now. Condensation, like breath gathering slowly from the inside. A shape started forming beneath it. Not words this time, just an outline. The vague impression of a face pressing gently against the other side. I backed away immediately. My pulse hammered in my ears. The outline disappeared slowly, but the warmth remained. I grabbed my coat from the chair. I didn't care if it sounded irrational anymore. I needed another human being. I unlocked the apartment door fast and stepped into the hallway. The silence outside felt even worse now. Long corridor, yellow lights, no movement. But something had changed. The apartment next door, 4B, was slightly open. Just an inch. I stopped walking. Cold air drifted through the gap. I stared at it. I knew that door was shut earlier. I remembered checking. My throat tightened. "Hello," I called softly. No answer. But from inside 4B, I heard breathing. Same slow rhythm. Same calm inhale. The hallway lights flickered once overhead. And for one terrible second, I thought I saw movement inside the apartment. Not a person walking. Something taller. Unfolding. I stepped back immediately. The door to 4B slowly creaked wider on its own. Darkness waited inside. No lights. No furniture visible. Just blackness. Then came another sound. Very soft. Almost affectionate. A whisper from inside the apartment. "You're loud tonight." Every hair on my arm stood up instantly. I backed toward my own apartment slowly. My breathing became shallow. The voice hadn't sounded angry. That was the worst part. It sounded familiar, like someone speaking to a person they knew well. I reached my door and grabbed the handle. Locked. I stared at it. I never locked it behind me. I twisted harder. Nothing. Then I heard footsteps above us. Slow. Dragging. Crossing the ceiling from one end of the building to the other. But there was no fifth floor. I looked upward instinctively. The footsteps stopped directly above me. Then came a new sound. Knocking. From inside my apartment. 3 slow taps against the front door. As if someone was now standing inside, trying to let me back in. My chest tightened painfully. I stepped away from the door. The hallway suddenly felt narrower. Longer too. The lights buzzed softly overhead. And then the whisper came again from apartment 4B. Closer now. Almost beside me. "You shouldn't ignore the walls." I turned toward the open doorway slowly. And for the first time, I saw a face inside the darkness. Not clearly. Just pale skin. One eye reflecting faint hallway light. Watching me without blinking. Then the hallway lights flickered again. And the face was suddenly much closer to the doorway than before. No footsteps. No movement. Just nearer. Like the building itself had shortened the distance between us. I stumbled backward hard against the opposite wall. My shoulder slammed into old wallpaper. And instantly, I heard breathing inside that wall too. Not one person. Several. Soft overlapping breaths surrounding me through the building itself. The walls weren't carrying sound. They were alive with it. Listening. Waiting. And somewhere inside them, something had finally realized I could hear it back. I started noticing the pattern the next morning. At first, it almost comforted me. After that horrible night, I needed something normal to hold on to. Anything predictable. Anything human. Snow pressed softly against the apartment windows while gray morning light filled the kitchen. I hadn't slept more than maybe 20 minutes total. My eyes burned. My head hurt. But daylight changed the building. Or at least it pretended to. The hallway looked smaller in the morning. Less threatening. The yellow lights no longer flickered. Apartment 4B was closed again. No sign it had ever opened. No voices. No breathing. Just silence. Still too much silence. I remember standing outside my door before work, staring at 4B across the hallway. There was dust gathered near the bottom frame. No footprints, no sound, and taped beside the handle was a faded notice from management. Vacant. I stared at that paper longer than I should have. Something about it felt staged, like a prop placed there recently. I almost knocked anyway, but then I heard the elevator arriving downstairs. The sound snapped me out of it. I left quickly. The cold air outside helped. Cars, traffic, people walking dogs. The city suddenly felt alive again. Normal. I kept telling myself I'd been exhausted. The building was old. Sounds traveled strangely. Maybe the stress of moving had twisted everything in my head. That explanation lasted until exactly 6:42 that evening, because that was when I first saw him. I had just gotten home from work. The hallway lights buzzed softly overhead while I unlocked my apartment door. And at the exact same moment, the door to 4B opened too. Not quickly, slowly, carefully. I turned instinctively. A man stepped halfway into the hallway. Tall, thin, maybe mid-40s. Dark hair combed neatly back. Gray sweater. No expression. He looked almost ordinary except for one thing. He moved at the exact same pace as me. When I paused, he paused. When I shifted my weight slightly, he did too. Not mockingly. Perfectly. Like a reflection with a half-second delay removed. A strange cold feeling spread through my chest. I nodded awkwardly. So someone does live there. The man stared at me quietly for a moment, then smiled very slightly. You came home late yesterday. His voice sounded calm, soft, almost tired. I frowned immediately. How do you know that? His smile faded. I hear things. Before I could answer, he stepped backward into apartment 4B and closed the door gently. No goodbye. No introduction. Just silence again. I stood there for several seconds without moving. Something felt deeply wrong about him. Not threatening exactly. Familiar. That was worse. Inside my apartment, the air felt warmer than before. The bathroom mirror no longer carried any messages. The walls stayed quiet. Part of me started relaxing, until I noticed the sound. Movement from next door. A chair scraping. Then footsteps. Then kitchen cabinets opening. I stopped unpacking and listened carefully. Every sound matched what I was doing. When I opened my refrigerator, a refrigerator opened next door. When I walked into the bedroom, footsteps moved into the neighboring bedroom. My skin tightened slowly. I tested it. I coughed twice. 2 coughs answered through the wall immediately after. Not imitation. Synchronization. Like our apartments shared the same rhythm. I stood perfectly still. The neighbor stopped moving too. The silence stretched. Then, a soft laugh came through the wall. Very faint. Very close. I backed away immediately. The laugh stopped. That night I tried ignoring it. I cooked dinner while keeping music playing softly on my phone. But the sounds continued. Cabinets, footsteps, water running, always matching my exact timing. I finally snapped around 9 p.m. I slammed my hand against the wall. Stop doing that. Instant silence answered. For a second, relief washed through me. Then a voice spoke softly from the other side. I'm not. My stomach dropped, because he sounded confused. Not defensive. Like he genuinely didn't understand the accusation. I stepped away from the wall slowly. The apartment suddenly felt smaller again. Then came 3 knocks, not from beside me, from inside my bedroom wall. I stared toward the hallway. Another knock answered from the kitchen wall, then another near the bathroom. The sounds moved through the apartment itself. Something inside the building was carrying them, or learning them. I grabbed my coat and left immediately. I ended up sitting in a diner 3 blocks away for almost 2 hours. Coffee, bright lights, people talking. I needed human noise. At some point, I started feeling stupid again. Paranoid. The exhaustion was getting to me. That's what I told myself. But when I finally returned to the building near midnight, something new waited for me. A folded piece of paper had been slid under my apartment door. My pulse quickened immediately. I picked it up carefully. Inside, written in neat handwriting, were 7 words. You move more at night now. No signature. No explanation. I looked instantly toward apartment 4B. Darkness beneath the door. No sound. I should have called the police. I know that. But something stopped me. Because deep down, I already knew the neighbor wasn't the real problem. The building was. I unlocked my apartment carefully and stepped inside. Everything looked normal again. Kitchen light on. Bedroom door open slightly. Silence. But on the kitchen table sat another glass of water. Half full. My breathing slowed. I hadn't left that there. Very slowly I approached it. The water trembled slightly. Tiny ripples moving across the surface. Like something heavy had just walked somewhere nearby. Then came footsteps overhead again. Slow dragging steps across the non-existent 5th floor. I stared upward. The footsteps stopped directly above my kitchen. And directly beside me. The wall breathed. Long inhale. Long exhale. This time I didn't run. I just stood there listening. Because another realization had begun forming inside my head. The neighbor wasn't copying me. Something in the building was learning my routines, studying them, practicing them, and maybe teaching them to someone else. I barely slept that night. Around 3 a.m., I woke suddenly without knowing why. The apartment was dark, except for faint streetlight glow through the curtains. For a few seconds, everything felt calm. Then I noticed movement. Not inside my room. Outside my bedroom window. I sat up slowly. My apartment was on the 4th floor. There shouldn't have been anyone outside. But there was. A figure stood motionless on the fire escape platform beyond the glass. Tall, thin, head slightly tilted, watching me sleep. I couldn't see a face clearly, only pale skin and dark clothing. My chest locked tight. The figure didn't move, didn't blink. Then slowly, inside apartment 4B, through the wall beside my bed, I heard my own voice whisper, "Don't look away from it." Every muscle in my body froze, because I hadn't spoken. But the voice was mine, perfectly mine. And when I looked back toward the window, the figure outside was suddenly much closer to the glass than before. The security office smelled like burnt coffee and wet carpet. I remember that clearly because I focused on those smells to stay calm. The building manager sat across from me at the small desk downstairs, while an old monitor flickered softly between us. He looked annoyed more than concerned, like I was becoming extra paperwork. You're saying someone's entering your apartment. I rubbed my eyes hard. I'm saying something's wrong on the 4th floor. He sighed quietly. Sir, nobody lives in 4B. I saw him. You probably saw maintenance. At 3 in the morning. He didn't answer immediately. That bothered me more than if he had laughed. Instead, he clicked through security footage with slow, tired movements. The screen showed the fourth-floor hallway from the previous night. Black and white footage. No sound. Just grainy images beneath dim hallway lights. There, I said suddenly. The video showed me stepping out of apartment 4C around midnight. I remembered this clearly. I remembered seeing the neighbor standing outside 4B. I remembered talking to him. But on the footage, I was alone. I watched myself pause in the hallway like I was listening to someone, then nodding slowly at empty space. My stomach tightened. The manager rewound the footage. Played it again. Same thing. No neighbor. No open apartment door. Just me standing in the silent hallway, talking to nothing. That's impossible, I whispered. The manager leaned back in his chair. You've been under stress. I ignored him, because something worse had caught my attention. The footage showed me turning toward the far end of the hallway suddenly. Like I noticed movement. Then I stepped backward slowly toward my apartment. Fear was visible even through the grainy video. But there was nothing there. Nothing chasing me. Nothing visible at all. Yet I remembered that moment perfectly. I remembered someone standing near the elevator. Tall, thin, watching me. The manager paused the video again. You see, empty hallway. My chest felt cold now. Can you play farther? He shrugged and let the footage continue. I watched myself unlock my apartment door. Step inside. Then pause halfway through entering. Like something inside the apartment surprised me. The manager frowned slightly. What's that? I leaned closer. The apartment door remained open for another few seconds after I entered. And inside the darkness of my apartment, a shadow moved. Not me. Something farther back in the hallway, inside 4C. Tall shape. Slow movement. Then the door closed. The manager froze the footage. For the first time, his expression changed. Neither of us spoke. The shadow wasn't clear enough to identify. But it was there, standing inside my apartment before I entered. The manager cleared his throat softly, probably lighting distortion. He didn't sound convinced. Neither was I. Then something else caught my eye. The timestamp, 12:43 a.m. I frowned immediately. That's wrong. What? I left my apartment around midnight. The manager checked another monitor. No, camera says 12:43. I stared at the screen. 43 missing minutes. Gone. Again. The same hollow feeling from before spread through my stomach. Like parts of my life were being quietly removed. The manager finally stood up. I can move you to another unit temporarily. The relief hit instantly. Yes, please. But then he hesitated. That might take a day or two. My heart sank again. Why? He avoided my eyes. Most apartments are occupied. I almost laughed. Occupied. In this building. I hadn't heard a single tenant besides the neighbor, who apparently didn't exist. The manager handed me a spare keycard for the laundry room downstairs. You can stay there a while if you feel uncomfortable tonight. I nodded slowly, but deep down, I already knew something terrible. The problem wasn't my apartment anymore. It was following me. When I returned upstairs later, the hallway lights looked dimmer than before. The fourth floor felt colder too. I stepped out of the elevator carefully. Apartment 4B remained closed. Silent. vacant notice still taped beside the handle. I walked toward my apartment slowly, then stopped. My front door was already open, just slightly, 3 inches, exactly like the bedroom door on my first night. A heavy numbness spread through my chest. I knew I locked it before leaving. I stood there listening. No movement inside. No breathing. Nothing. The silence felt deeper now. Patient. I pushed the door open slowly. The apartment looked untouched. Kitchen clean. Lights off. Bedroom door open slightly. But one thing had changed. My suitcase sat in the middle of the living room floor. Unzipped. Clothes folded neatly beside it. I stared without moving. I hadn't unpacked those clothes. Someone had. Or something had. Then I noticed another detail. One shirt remained hanging separately over the couch. The exact outfit I had worn yesterday. The fabric looked damp, like someone else had recently taken it off. I backed away slowly. And then, a voice behind me. Very soft. You came back early. I turned instantly. The hallway outside was empty, but apartment 4B now stood open again. Darkness inside. Waiting. My pulse hammered painfully. The voice came from inside that apartment. Calm. Familiar. Almost welcoming. I should have run downstairs. Instead, I stepped closer. Not because I was brave. Because I needed answers more than comfort now. The hallway carpet softened my footsteps until I barely heard myself moving. Apartment 4B looked completely dark inside. No furniture visible. No lights. Just deep shadow. But there was definitely someone inside. I could feel it, watching me approach. Then I noticed something strange near the doorway. Footprints. Wet footprints. Leading out from the apartment. I frowned immediately. Because they weren't shoe prints. They were barefoot. And they ended directly in front of my apartment door. Like someone had walked from 4B into my apartment during the night. I stared at them too long. Long enough to notice one more detail. The footprints matched my size exactly. A cold wave rolled through me. Then from somewhere deep inside apartment 4B, I heard the sound of a television playing softly. Static, low voices, old music. The sounds felt wrong inside the silence of the building. Almost exciting, like something inside wanted me to come farther. I stepped into the doorway carefully. The air inside smelled warm, not dusty, lived in. The darkness stretched deeper ahead. And then suddenly, the television light flickered faintly from another room. I moved toward it slowly. Every instinct told me to stop. But another feeling had begun growing stronger lately. Curiosity. Dangerous curiosity. The kind that makes people open doors they shouldn't. I reached the room at the end of the hallway and froze. The television sat on the floor playing security footage. Black and white hallway footage from the building. The exact same camera angle from downstairs. Only this footage was different. Because in this version, I wasn't alone. I watched myself standing in the hallway the previous night. And beside me stood the tall, thin neighbor from 4B. Clear as day. He faced the camera while I spoke to him. But his face looked exactly like mine. I don't remember leaving apartment 4B. That's the part that still bothers me most. 1 second I was standing in front of that television, staring at my own face, smiling back at me from the security footage. The next, I was sitting on my bed inside apartment 4C, with all the lights turned off. Morning sunlight leaked weakly through the curtains. My shoes were gone. My coat hung neatly beside the front door. And my hands were covered in dust. Gray dust packed deep beneath my fingernails. I stared at them for a long time, trying to remember. Nothing came back. The missing hours again. Except this time, something else had changed too. The apartment no longer felt unfamiliar. That sounds strange, but it's true. Before, the place felt empty. Now it felt inhabited, settled, like the building had finally accepted me. That terrified me more than anything else. I got up slowly. Every movement felt heavy. The silence around me no longer felt accidental. It felt attentive, like something behind the walls was awake now. Watching, I walked into the bathroom and froze immediately. There were scratches on the mirror. Fresh scratches. Words carved directly into the glass. UOPNED it. My chest tightened hard. I touched the letters carefully. The cuts were real, deep enough to catch my fingernail. And suddenly, a memory flashed through my head. Not complete, just a fragment. Myself standing in darkness somewhere narrow, breathing hard, my hands pressing against old wallpaper. Then a sound. A door creaking opened somewhere inside the wall. The memory vanished instantly. I stumbled backward against the sink. The apartment felt colder now. And then I heard it again. Breathing. Not beside me this time. Underneath me. From inside the floorboards. Slow inhale. Slow exhale. I stepped away immediately. The breathing moved too, following beneath the floor, tracking me. I grabbed my phone. Still no signal. No internet. Nothing. Like the building existed outside the rest of the city. I needed to leave. That thought repeated in my head over and over. Leave. Now. But when I opened the apartment door, the hallway was wrong. Longer. Much longer. The elevator at the far end looked impossibly distant now. The overhead lights stretched into tiny yellow dots, fading into darkness. My stomach dropped slowly. I stepped back inside and slammed the door shut. The apartment breathed quietly around me. Then came the knock. 3 soft taps. From inside the bedroom wall. I stared toward the room. Another 3 taps answered from the kitchen. Then the bathroom. The sounds moved in patterns now, like directions, guiding me somewhere. Before I realized it, I was following them. Bedroom, kitchen, bathroom. The final knocks came from behind the living room bookshelf. I stopped. The bookshelf sat against the shared wall with apartment 4B. Old wooden shelves, mostly empty. I frowned slowly. Something about it looked different today. Closer, like it hadn't originally belonged there. My pulse quickened. I grabbed the edge carefully and pulled. The shelf moved easier than it should have. Dust drifted softly into the air. And behind it, a door, narrow, tall, painted the exact same color as the wall. No handle, no frame visible, just a shape hidden beneath layers of paint and wallpaper. My mouth went dry instantly. The breathing inside the apartment stopped completely. The entire building seemed to go silent at once. Waiting. I stepped closer. The door looked old. Older than the building itself somehow. Tiny cracks spread across the surface like dried skin. Then slowly, the door clicked open by itself. Just slightly, a dark gap appeared. Warm air drifted out. Not cold, warm, and carrying that same faint perfume smell from the closet upstairs in the cabin. No, not cabin. I stopped. Another memory flashed. Not mine. A woman walking through endless hallways, bare feet against old carpet, whispering softly to herself. The vision disappeared instantly. I pressed both hands against my temples. Something inside the building was bleeding into me now. Memories, voices, lives. The gap in the hidden door widened another inch. Darkness waited beyond it, but not empty darkness. Depth, impossible depth, like the space behind the wall stretched far beyond the size of the apartment. I should have run. Instead, I stepped closer. Curiosity again. That awful, dangerous curiosity. I leaned toward the opening slowly and heard it. People breathing. Dozens of them. Maybe more. Soft, overlapping breath deep inside the hidden space. Not struggling. Sleeping. Listening. Living there. My heart pounded painfully. I pushed the door wider. The room beyond shouldn't have existed. Narrow hallway. Old floral wallpaper peeling from damp walls. Low ceiling pipes rattling softly overhead. Dim yellow lights buzzing in long, endless rows. The corridor stretched impossibly far into darkness, farther than the building itself could physically allow. Apartment doors lined both sides. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. All numbered 4B. Every single one. I stood frozen in the doorway, and somewhere far down the endless hall, a door opened slowly. A figure stepped out. Tall, thin, gray sweater. My face. He looked directly at me. Then another door opened farther down. Another version of me stepped out. Then another. And another. Different clothes. Different ages. Some older. Some injured. One missing hair. One smiling faintly. All staring toward me silently. My breathing became shallow. None of them moved closer. They simply watched, like they had been waiting for me to finally arrive. Then from somewhere deeper in the corridor, a woman laughed softly. The sound echoed gently through the endless apartments. Warm, almost kind. And suddenly, every version of me turned their heads toward the sound at the exact same time. The movement happened so perfectly together, it made my stomach twist. Then they all looked back at me again. One of them whispered quietly, "You took longer than most." The lights overhead flickered softly, and I finally understood something terrible. The building wasn't haunted. It was collecting people, copying them, repeating them inside itself like echoes trapped between walls. Every lonely tenant, every quiet person, every sleepless mind, stored somewhere inside this impossible hidden place. And the longer you stayed, the more versions it made. I backed away from the doorway slowly, but another voice spoke this time. My own voice. Older, tired. You can still leave. Hope flashed through me instantly. Then the older version of me smiled sadly. But you won't. The hidden hallway suddenly darkened deeper behind them. And for the first time, I saw movement farther inside the endless corridor. Something massive shifting slowly between the apartment doors. Not human. Too large. Its shape bent strangely against the ceiling, like the building itself was trying to walk. The copies of me stepped backward immediately. Their expressions changed. Fear. Real fear. Then all the apartment doors along the corridor began opening together, hundreds of doors creaking slowly in unison, and from inside each dark apartment, breathing, closer now, hungry, the older version of me looked at me one final time, then whispered softly, "Close the door before it learns your voice completely." The lights went out instantly across the endless hallway. Darkness swallowed everything, and somewhere deep inside it, something began running toward me. The fog started talking 3 nights after I arrived in Blackwater Cove. Not wind, not birds' voices. The first time I heard them, I was standing outside the Harbor Motel at almost 2 in the morning. The town was gone under a blanket of gray fog, so thick it looked solid. Even the streetlights struggled through it. Their yellow glow barely reached the wet pavement. I remember holding a paper cup of burnt coffee between my hands, staring toward the ocean I couldn't see. Then somebody whispered my name. Not loud, not dramatic, just soft enough to make my shoulders tighten. Evan. I turned so fast coffee splashed over my fingers. Nobody stood behind me. The parking lot was empty except for my rental truck and an old fishing van covered in rust. I listened again. Nothing. Just the distant groan of waves somewhere beyond the fog. I told myself I was tired. I'd been driving for 10 hours straight to reach the town. My publisher wanted me to finish a book about isolated coastal communities, and Blackwater Cove sounded perfect. Small population, old lighthouse, missing fishermen stories, enough local folklore to sell copies. At the time, I thought the town felt peaceful. I didn't understand why almost every house had blackout curtains, or why people avoided the shoreline after dark, or why the motel owner looked nervous when I mentioned the lighthouse. She was an older woman named Ruth, thin face, pale eyes, cigarette voice. When I asked if the lighthouse still worked, she stopped wiping glasses behind the front desk. For a second, she just stared at me. Then she said, "Only during fog season." I laughed a little. Fog season. You'll hear it soon enough. That was all she said. I should have left then. But strange little towns were exactly why I came there. The next morning felt different. Normal. Sunlight poured over the harbor. Fishing boats drifted calmly in the water. Seagulls screamed overhead. The fog from the night before was completely gone. Blackwater Cove almost looked beautiful in daylight. That made it worse somehow, because everyone acted like the night didn't exist. I spent most of the day walking around town taking notes. The people were polite but distant. Nobody stayed in conversations long. Nobody smiled for very long either. And every road seemed to lead uphill toward the lighthouse. You could see it from almost anywhere in town. Tall, white, weathered by salt and storms. It stood on black cliffs, overlooking the ocean like it was watching the entire town. By sunset, the fog started rolling back in. I noticed people hurrying indoors before dark. Storefronts closed early. Harbor workers tied down boats in silence. Even the gulls disappeared. By 9 o'clock, the town looked abandoned. That was when I heard the lighthouse for the first time. Not the light. The sound. A low metallic groan drifted through the fog. Then came voices underneath it. Dozens of them. Whispering, crying, murmuring over one another, like distant radio stations bleeding together. I froze beside my motel window. At first, I thought the sound came from outside the hallway. Then I realized it was coming through the walls. The pipes vibrated softly. The whispers moved inside them. My stomach tightened. I opened the curtain carefully. Fog covered everything beyond the parking lot. But up on the cliff, the lighthouse beam slowly turned through the gray darkness. Each time the light passed over town, the whispers grew louder. I told myself there had to be a real explanation. Wind through old pipes, electrical interference, maybe the ocean carrying sound strangely through the fog. But then I heard words. Actual words. Help me. Don't let him. Below. The voices overlapped too fast to understand clearly. Then something hit my motel door. 3 slow knocks. I nearly dropped my notebook. The knocking came again. Not aggressive, just patient. I walked toward the door carefully, my heartbeat suddenly loud in my ears. Another knock. I looked through the peephole. Nobody there. Only fog drifting through the parking lot. I kept staring. Then I noticed wet footprints outside my door. Bare feet. Long, narrow prints leading from the fog. But they stopped directly outside my room, as if whoever made them was still standing there. I didn't open the door. I barely slept that night. The whispers continued until almost dawn. Around 4 in the morning, I finally drifted off on top of the blankets. Then I dreamed about the lighthouse. I stood inside it while seawater dripped down the walls. Someone climbed the spiral stairs above me. Slow footsteps. Wet footsteps. I couldn't see who it was, but I knew they were coming down toward me. And somewhere below the lighthouse, something heavy moved underwater. I woke up gasping. The room was freezing cold, and my bathroom sink was running. I knew I hadn't turned it on. The water spilling from the faucet looked dark gray in the dim light. For a second, I thought it was seawater. I shut it off quickly. That was the moment I noticed writing on the bathroom mirror. 3 words, not written clearly, more like traced by a wet finger. He hears them. I stumbled backward so hard I hit the wall. The message slowly dripped downward before disappearing completely, like condensation evaporating. I stared at the mirror for almost a minute. Nothing remained. No marks. No fingerprints. Just my own pale reflection. I left the motel after sunrise and went straight to the harbor cafe. I needed noise, people, daylight. Anything normal. Only 3 people sat inside. An old fisherman drinking black coffee. A teenage waitress half asleep behind the counter. And a man in a dark Coast Guard jacket staring out the window. When I mentioned hearing voices during the fog, the entire cafe went quiet. Even the waitress stopped moving. The fisherman looked at me carefully. Then he asked, "Did they say your name yet?" A cold feeling spread through my chest. I lied. "No." He nodded slowly like he didn't believe me. The Coast Guard officer finally spoke without looking away from the window. "They start with names." Nobody explained further. I kept asking questions anyway. That was how I learned about the disappearances. Over the last 20 years, 11 people had vanished during fog season. Tourists mostly. 2 fishermen. 1 lighthouse keeper. No bodies ever washed ashore. No boats found drifting. People simply disappeared after hearing voices near the cliffs. Officially, the deaths were blamed on storms and dangerous terrain. Unofficially, nobody in town walked near the lighthouse after dark anymore, especially during heavy fog. I should have listened. Instead, that evening, I drove uphill toward the cliffs. Part of me felt stupid for being afraid. Another part needed answers. The road twisted through dead pine trees, bent sideways by ocean wind. Fog thickened higher up the cliff until my headlights barely reached 10 feet ahead. Then the lighthouse appeared. Huge. Silent. Its white paint peeled away in long strips like dead skin. The beam rotated slowly above me. I parked near the gate and stepped outside. The air smelled wrong. Not salt. Not rain. Something rotten underneath it. Like wet wood left underwater too long. The whispers started immediately. Soft at first, then louder. Voices crowded together inside the fog around me. Some crying, some begging, some laughing quietly. My hands shook as I turned toward the ocean. That was when I saw figures standing below the cliff. At least 6 of them, perfectly still near the rocks, watching the lighthouse. I couldn't tell if they were people or shadows. Fog moved through them strangely. One of the figures slowly lifted an arm toward me. And far out beyond the black water, I heard a foghorn answer back. Deeper, ancient, close enough to vibrate through the cliff beneath my feet. The lighthouse beam swept over the ocean again. For half a second, I saw something enormous moving below the surface. Not a wave, not a boat, something long and pale turning slowly underwater. Then every whisper around me suddenly stopped. Complete silence. Even the ocean went quiet. And from somewhere inside the lighthouse, someone began climbing down the spiral stairs. The footsteps inside the lighthouse stopped the moment I touched the front door. Everything went silent again. No whispers, no ocean, nothing. I stood there with my hand frozen against the cold metal handle, while fog drifted around the cliffs behind me. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. Then the lighthouse beam swept across the rocks below. The figures standing near the shore were gone. Every single one. I almost turned back right then. But something about the silence felt wrong. Heavy, like the lighthouse was waiting for me to make a choice. I pulled the door open slowly. The smell hit first. Wet stone, rust, and seawater old enough to rot wood. The inside of the lighthouse was darker than it should have been. My flashlight barely reached the spiral stairs twisting upward through the center tower. Water dripped somewhere above me. Slow, steady. I stepped inside carefully and closed the door behind me. The sound echoed upward forever. At first, the place looked abandoned. Dust covered the railings. Old ropes hung from hooks near the wall. A cracked oil painting of the coastline leaned sideways beside a broken desk. But then I noticed something strange. The floor near the stairs was wet. Fresh, wet footprints. Bare feet again. The same narrow shape I'd seen outside my motel room. They led upward. I stared at them for several seconds. Then I started climbing. Every step groaned beneath my weight. Wind hummed faintly through cracks in the tower walls. The higher I climbed, the colder the air became. About halfway up, I found the first journal. It sat on a small wooden shelf beside an old lantern. The cover was black leather, swollen from moisture. Keeper logs. That was all it said. I opened it carefully. Most pages were warped and stained gray from age, but the writing inside looked strangely fresh. Sharp ink. Neat handwriting. The first entries seemed normal enough. Weather reports. Ship sightings. Fog conditions. Then the names started appearing. March 3rd, Daniel Mercer heard the voices tonight. April 11th, Elise Warren stood near the cliffs after midnight. June 27th, Jonah Reed finally answered the light. I frowned. The dates beside the entries were impossible. Some were from the 1970s, some from the 1930s, but the handwriting never changed. Not once. Every page looked written by the same hand. I kept flipping through. The names continued for decades. Hundreds of them. Beside each name was a short sentence. They listened too long. She followed the fog. He returned to the water willingly. Then I found my own name. My chest tightened instantly. Evan Holt arrived during the first heavy fog. The entry was dated 3 days before I reached town. I read it again, then again slower. 3 days before. My fingers suddenly felt numb. The next line made it worse. He already hears them. A loud creak echoed somewhere above me. I snapped the journal shut. For a second, I thought someone stood higher up the staircase. But the flashlight showed only darkness curling upward. Still, I knew I wasn't alone anymore. That feeling settled deep in my stomach. I kept climbing anyway. The tower narrowed higher up. Old pipes ran along the walls, dripping cold water onto the stairs. My flashlight flickered every few minutes like the lighthouse itself was interfering with it. Then I heard humming. Soft. A woman humming somewhere above me. The sound drifted down the spiral staircase slowly. Not singing, just humming the same low melody over and over. I stopped moving. The humming stopped too. Complete silence again. I whispered hello. No answer. But far below me, something tapped gently against the lighthouse door. 3 slow knocks. Exactly like the motel room. I backed against the railing. Another knock. Then another. Whoever stood outside didn't sound impatient. Just patient. Waiting. The foghorn groaned somewhere beyond the cliffs. The sound vibrated through the entire tower. And underneath it, the whispers returned. Faint voices curled through the walls around me. Come below. He sees you now. Don't turn around. I turned anyway. Nobody stood behind me. But the flashlight beam caught fresh water dripping from the railing beside my shoulder, as if someone had been leaning there seconds earlier. I climbed faster after that. The lantern room sat at the very top of the lighthouse, beneath the rotating light itself. Huge glass windows surrounded the chamber, though most were clouded with salt and grime. The beam turned slowly through the fog outside. The machinery groaned with every rotation. And sitting beside the light mechanism was another journal. This one looked newer, dry, clean, like someone had been using it recently. My hands shook as I opened it. The first page read, "If you are reading this, the fog has already learned your voice." I swallowed hard. The journal belonged to the last lighthouse keeper. His name was Arthur Vale. Most entries were fragmented and paranoid. The voices come from beneath the cliffs. The town pretends not to hear them. They only call certain people. Then the entries became stranger. Arthur claimed the lighthouse didn't guide ships. It guided something else. According to him, the fog arrived every year carrying voices from the ocean caves below Blackwater Cove. The light kept those voices contained. But sometimes, the fog learned names. I almost laughed reading that part. It sounded insane. Then I reached the final pages. The handwriting became shaky there. Uneven. Terrified. They know who will arrive before they come. The names appear before the people do. They are choosing replacements. A cold chill spread slowly through my arms. Replacement for what? The next entry answered it. The lighthouse must always have a keeper. My flashlight flickered hard. For one horrible second, the room went completely dark. In that darkness, I heard breathing beside me. Not mine. Someone else. Close enough to touch. The light came back suddenly. I spun around. Nobody stood there, but the journal pages had turned on their own. The final entry stared up at me. Do not let them take you below. Then beneath it, in fresher ink, Evan is almost ready. My knees nearly gave out. Fresh ink. Not faded. Fresh. As if someone had written it minutes ago. The humming started again behind me. Closer this time. I turned slowly toward the glass windows. At first I only saw fog outside. Then shapes began appearing inside it. Faces. Dozens of pale faces floating beyond the lighthouse glass. Men. Women. Children. All staring inward silently. Water streamed down their skin. Their mouths moved softly together. Whispering. The beam rotated across them. For half a second, every face vanished. Then the light moved on, and they were suddenly closer, pressing against the glass now. One woman stood directly in front of me, dark wet hair hanging across her face, bare feet, gray skin swollen with seawater. The same woman from the highway cliff, except now I could see her eyes clearly. They looked empty, not dead, hungry. Her lips slowly parted, and she whispered my name. The lighthouse machinery suddenly stopped turning. The beam froze facing the ocean. Instant darkness swallowed half the room. Outside, the foghorn blasted again. Much louder now. Close. Too close. Something massive moved beneath the cliff below the lighthouse. I could hear water crashing against rock far under the tower. Then came another sound. Climbing. Heavy wet sounds spiraling upward through the staircase beneath me. Not footsteps anymore. Dragging. Like something pulling itself up the tower. The journal slipped from my hands. And from somewhere deep below the lighthouse, I heard dozens of voices speak together at once. He finally came back. I didn't remember leaving the lighthouse. That was the first thing that scared me. One moment I stood in the lantern room, listening to something drag itself up the spiral stairs beneath me. The next moment, I was sitting inside my truck at the harbor. Engine running. Hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles hurt. Rain tapped softly against the windshield. Morning light spread weakly across the ocean. For several seconds, I honestly thought I was dreaming. Then I looked down. My boots were soaked with seawater, and lying on the passenger seat beside me was the keeper's journal. I stared at it without breathing. I knew I hadn't taken it. I remembered dropping it on the lighthouse floor. Still, there it was. The black leather cover looked wetter now. Salt crystals clung to the edges like it had been underwater for years instead of hours. I almost threw it out the window. Instead, I drove back to the motel. The town looked wrong during daylight now. Too quiet. People moved carefully through the streets without making eye contact. Harbor workers unloaded fishing nets in silence. Nobody laughed. Nobody shouted across docks. It felt like everyone was listening for something. When I entered the motel lobby, Ruth looked up sharply from behind the counter. The moment she saw the journal under my arm, the color drained from her face. "You went there," she whispered. I didn't answer. She walked around the counter slowly. Her cigarette trembled between her fingers. Did it stop turning? I swallowed. The light. She nodded once. I realized then how serious her expression was. For the first time since arriving in Blackwater Cove, someone looked genuinely afraid. I told her about the voices, the faces outside the lighthouse windows, the footsteps climbing upward. But I didn't tell her about my missing memory. And I definitely didn't mention hearing the voices say I'd come back. Ruth listened silently until I finished. Then she said something that stayed with me. They only climb ashore during heavy fog. A cold feeling spread through my stomach. What climbs ashore? But she was already shaking her head. No more questions today. She locked the motel office after that. Actually locked it. Like she expected something to come inside before dark. I spent most of the afternoon reading Arthur Vale's journal in my room. The entries became more disturbing the deeper I went. He described strange lights moving beneath the ocean surface during fog season. Not reflections, not boats, lights too deep underwater to belong to anything human. According to Arthur, fishermen sometimes saw figures walking along the seafloor beneath their boats. Human shapes, pale bodies, moving slowly toward shore. At first I assumed it was superstition mixed with isolation. Then I reached an entry dated October 14th, 1987. The drowned return differently now. They remember names. I read that line at least 5 times. Outside my room window, fog slowly rolled back into town. Right on schedule. By evening, my nerves were wrecked. Part of me wanted to leave Blackwater Cove immediately. But another part needed answers. And deep down, I think the fog already knew that. Around sunset, somebody knocked softly on my motel door. Not 3 knocks this time. Just one. I opened it carefully. The old fisherman from the cafe stood outside wearing a raincoat darkened by seawater. Up close, he looked much older than I first realized. His eyes seemed exhausted. "You're the writer," he said quietly. I nodded. He glanced toward the journal behind me. "You saw them." Not a question. I hesitated, then nodded again. He looked toward the fog outside. "They're walking tonight." The way he said it made my chest tighten. Before I could ask questions, he handed me a folded piece of paper. Dock 7, midnight. Then he walked away into the mist. I should have ignored him. Instead, that night I went. The harbor looked almost unreal beneath the fog. Boats rocked gently against wooden docks while pale mist drifted across black water. Dock 7 sat farther from town near an old fish processing building that looked abandoned. 3 men waited there beside a trawler. The fishermen from the cafe stood with them. Nobody introduced themselves. Nobody seemed interested in talking much either. One of the men handed me thick waterproof gloves. Another gave me a flashlight. Then they climbed onto the boat silently. I almost stayed behind, but curiosity pulled harder than fear. That was my mistake. The trawler pushed slowly into the fog around midnight. The farther we moved from shore, the quieter the world became. No gulls, no wind. Even the engine sounded strangely muffled. Fog swallowed everything beyond the boat railings. The ocean beneath us looked black and endless. One fisherman finally spoke. "Don't answer if they call your name." I looked at him sharply, but his eyes stayed fixed on the water. We drifted farther out. Then the engine shut off completely. Silence. The men stood perfectly still around the deck, waiting. I heard it a minute later. Singing, very soft. Dozens of voices singing somewhere beneath the ocean. Not loud enough to understand words. Just low human sounds drifting upward through the water. The fishermen refused to look at each other. One quietly made the sign of the cross. Then lights appeared below us. Small pale lights moving deep beneath the boat. At first I thought they were fish, but they moved wrong. Too slow, too organized. The lights rose closer to the surface, and shapes formed around them. Human shapes. My breathing stopped. Figures walked across the ocean floor beneath us. At least 15 of them. maybe more. Pale bodies drifting through dark water like sleepwalkers. Their movements looked slow but steady, all walking in the same direction, toward Blackwater Cove. One of the fishermen whispered, "Low tide brings them closer." The figures kept moving beneath us. Men, women, children, all barefoot, all pale as drowned skin. Their eyes glowed faintly white underwater, and every single face stared upward at the boat. At us. The singing grew louder. One figure suddenly stopped walking. A woman. Long dark hair floated around her face in the water. I recognized her immediately. The same woman from the lighthouse window. Slowly, she lifted one arm upward toward me. My entire body locked up. Then I heard my name beneath the water. Perfectly clear. Evan. The voice came from directly below the boat. The fishermen panicked instantly. "Start the engine," someone hissed. But before the engine turned over, more voices joined in, whispering my name from the ocean floor. The figures below us had stopped walking now. Every face tilted upward together, watching me. The woman smiled faintly beneath the water. Then she opened her mouth impossibly wide. Black seawater poured from it. The boat suddenly lurched hard to one side. Everyone grabbed the rails. Something massive moved underneath us. Not one of the figures. Something far larger. A dark shape passed beneath the trawler deep below the walking bodies. The ocean itself seemed to shift around it. The fishermen looked terrified now. One started praying under his breath. The singing stopped completely. That silence felt worse. Then all the underwater figures turned together toward shore and began walking faster. Not normal walking. Jerking movements now, like puppets dragged by invisible strings, straight toward Blackwater Cove. The engine finally roared back to life. The captain spun the boat hard toward land. Nobody spoke during the ride back. Nobody needed to. Halfway to shore, I looked back once. The fog behind us glowed, faintly white above the water, and deep beneath the ocean surface. Hundreds of pale lights moved slowly toward town. The first time the lighthouse said my name, I almost drove my truck into the ditch. It came through the foghorn. Not around it, not beneath it, through it. A long, dying groan rolled across the water, low enough to shake the windows of the harbor office. Then, buried inside that sound like a voice trapped under ice, I heard it. "Daniel." I remember freezing with my hand still on the steering wheel. The fog outside was so thick it erased the entire coastline. The world ended 10 feet from the windshield. Even the sea looked gone, just gray movement, gray air, gray nothing. Then the horn sounded again. Long, deep, old, Daniel. My throat tightened. I turned off the engine and listened hard, telling myself it was distortion, wind pressure, my brain forcing patterns into noise. People hear things in static all the time. But my body already knew something was wrong, because the voice sounded tired, like it had been trying to reach me for a very long time. The harbor was empty that night. Most of the fishermen had stopped going out after sunset weeks ago, ever since the stories started. Shapes under the water, voices in the fog, lights moving beneath the surface where nothing should have been alive. I used to laugh at all of it. Not anymore. I stepped out of the truck slowly. Cold air wrapped around me instantly, wet and salty, the kind that crawls through your clothes. The lighthouse beam swept once through the fog far above me. For half a second, I thought I saw figures standing near the rocks below it. Then the light moved on. Gone. I grabbed my flashlight and started walking toward the harbor office. My boots scraped across damp wood. Somewhere nearby, metal chains clinked softly against boats drifting in their slips. The horn blasted again. This time my name came clearer. Closer. Daniel. I stopped walking. A pulse of fear moved through my chest. Someone knew I was here. But there was nobody on the docks. No footsteps. No voices. Only fog shifting slowly between the boats like breathing. I hurried inside the office and locked the door behind me. The room smelled like coffee grounds and seawater. Old paperwork covered the desk. A radio crackled softly in the corner. I tried distracting myself by checking Tide reports, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Then I noticed something strange. The radio wasn't crackling anymore. It sounded like whispering, very faint. At first, I thought it was interference. Then I heard my name again. Not from outside, from the radio itself. I lunged forward and shut it off so hard the chair tipped backward. Silence filled the room. Real silence, but only for a few seconds, because then footsteps moved across the roof overhead. Slow, heavy. I looked up immediately. The office was 1 story tall. There shouldn't have been anyone above me. The steps crossed from one side to the other with a dragging sound between them, like wet boots scraping wood. I grabbed the flashlight again and backed toward the door. Another step, another drag. Then it stopped directly above me. The ceiling creaked once. Dust drifted down onto the desk, and a voice whispered my name one more time, right above my head. I ran out into the fog before I even realized I opened the door. The cold air hit my lungs hard. I nearly slipped on the dock stairs. Behind me, the office stayed dark and still. No movement. No shadow in the windows. Nothing. But I knew something had been inside with me. The lighthouse beams swept over the harbor again. This time it lingered longer across the water. And that was when I saw them. Figures, standing waist deep in the ocean. At least 6 of them, perfectly still. The fog moved around their bodies, hiding parts of them, revealing them again. I couldn't see faces, only pale outlines beneath black water. One of them lifted an arm slowly, not waving, pointing at me. My stomach dropped. I stumbled backward, nearly falling between the docks. Then the beam shifted away. The figures vanished instantly. I stood there breathing hard, staring at empty water. No splashes, no movement, nothing. But deep inside, I felt something changing. Like the town had finally stopped watching me from a distance and started recognizing me. I drove home fast that night, faster than I should have on those narrow coastal roads. Fog swallowed the headlights whole. Every few seconds, I checked the rearview mirror. Not because I thought a car was following me, because I kept feeling like someone was sitting in the back seat. The house was dark when I got home, small, quiet, safe. At least it used to feel safe. I locked every door behind me and turned on every light. Then I noticed the answering machine, blinking red in the kitchen. One new message. I frowned. Almost nobody called me anymore. I pressed play. Static filled the speaker first. Then came the lighthouse horn. Low, distant, and beneath it, Daniel. I ripped the cord from the wall. The machine died instantly, but the message kept playing. The same stretched voice, the same impossible sound, coming from the dead speaker. I backed away slowly until my shoulders hit the wall. Then the message changed. The voice became clearer. Closer. You left us. The machine finally stopped. Silence returned. But not relief. Never relief. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those figures in the water, waiting, pointing. Around 3 in the morning, I woke to a sound downstairs. Knocking. 3 slow knocks against the front door. I stayed frozen in bed. Another 3 knocks came. Not loud. Patient. I checked the window beside my bed carefully. Fog pressed against the glass outside. Nothing else. Then I heard water dripping downstairs. Not rain. Heavier, like soaked clothes dripping onto wood floors. I grabbed the baseball bat beside my bed and forced myself downstairs 1 step at a time. The knocking had stopped, but the dripping continued. Drip, drip, drip. My heartbeat became painfully loud. I reached the bottom step and saw water spread across the hallway floor. Thin trails of seawater, leading from the front door into the house. The door was still locked, still chained, but the floor beyond it glistened wet under the porch light. Another drip echoed deeper inside the house. From the kitchen, I moved slowly toward it. The smell hit first. Salt water, rot, seaweed. Then my flashlight reached the kitchen doorway, and I stopped breathing. Wet footprints covered the floor. Bare human footprints, leading from the back door toward the hallway, toward the stairs, toward my bedroom. I followed them with the flashlight, my hands trembling harder with every step. The prints stopped halfway up the staircase. Just stopped, like whoever made them disappeared between one step and the next. A deep horn echoed across town again. Even from miles away, I heard it clearly. And inside it, my name. Long, mournful, hungry. I didn't go back upstairs after that. I sat in the kitchen until sunrise with every light on, and the bat across my knees. When morning finally came, the footprints were gone, but the floor still smelled like the ocean. I told myself I was losing my mind. Stress, sleep deprivation, fear feeding fear. So I drove to the lighthouse after sunrise, determined to prove there was a logical answer. The keeper's station sat empty when I arrived. Dust covered everything. Cold coffee sat untouched beside old journals. But something new caught my attention immediately. A fresh puddle of seawater near the stairs leading up into the tower. Not old, fresh. I followed it upward carefully, step by step. The spiral staircase groaned beneath my boots. The higher I climbed, the colder the air became. Then I heard breathing above me. Slow, wet, human. I stopped instantly. The breathing stopped too. My flashlight shook in my hand. Hello, I called out. No answer. Only foghorn vibrations humming through the walls. I climbed the rest of the way and found nobody there. Just the giant lens turning slowly inside the tower. But written across the fogged glass beside it were 3 words. Not scratched. Written from the inside with a wet finger. You came back. I stared at the message so long my flashlight dimmed. Then the horn sounded directly beneath the tower, violent enough to shake the floor. And this time, it didn't say my name. It said something worse. It said, stay. The lighthouse kept turning after the keeper disappeared. That was the first thing that broke people. Not the voices, not the figures in the water, the rotation. Every person in town knew the old lighthouse motor barely worked anymore. It groaned in winter, jammed during storms. Half the time the keeper had to restart it by hand. But 3 nights after I found those words on the glass. You came back. The light began rotating perfectly. Smooth, silent, constant, and nobody was inside. I know because I checked. Twice. The second time, I brought Sheriff Collins with me. He didn't want to go near the tower anymore. None of us did, but the fog had grown worse each night and people were starting to panic. Children waking up speaking names they'd never heard before. Boats returning empty. Phone calls filled with nothing except the sound of the horn. The whole town felt infected, like something had come ashore without anyone noticing. Collins held his flashlight tight as we climbed the lighthouse stairs together. "You still hearing it?" he asked quietly. I nodded, not just hearing it anymore. Feeling it. That was the part I hadn't told anyone. Every time the horn sounded now, I felt pressure behind my eyes, like memories trying to force themselves forward. Dreams too. Cold black water. Dozens of pale faces beneath it, watching me from below. The tower room was empty when we reached it. No keeper. No footprints. Nothing except the huge lens turning slowly through the fog. Smooth. Perfect. Collins walked around the room twice. "There's nobody here," he muttered. Then he noticed the journal sitting beside the control panel. New. Wet. Neither of us had seen it there before. He opened it carefully. Most pages were blank, except the final one. Names filled the paper from top to bottom. Dozens of them, written in the same shaky handwriting from the keeper's logs. Collins frowned. "What the hell is this?" Then his face changed. He stopped breathing for a second, because near the bottom of the page was his own name, right beneath mine. The horn blasted outside. The tower shook violently, and beneath the sound, clear as a whisper beside my ear, something spoke again. "Almost home." Collins slammed the journal shut immediately. "We're leaving," he said. I didn't argue. We practically ran down the staircase. But halfway down, the light above us suddenly stopped rotating. The entire tower fell dark. Not silent. Dark. The fog outside swallowed everything instantly. Then footsteps started moving above us. Slow. Heavy. One step at a time. Collins froze below me on the stairs. His flashlight beam shook across the walls. Someone was descending toward us. I heard wet breathing between each step. A dragging sound, like soaked clothes scraping concrete. Collins pulled his gun. "Who's there?" No answer. The footsteps continued downward. Closer. Closer. Then the lighthouse beam suddenly snapped back on overhead. The light exploded through the fog again, and the footsteps stopped instantly. We ran the rest of the way down without looking back. Outside, the town barely looked real anymore. Fog drifted through every street. People moved quickly with heads down, avoiding eye contact. Windows stayed shut even during daylight. Everyone was listening now. Waiting. The voices had spread beyond the lighthouse. Some heard them through pipes. Some through radios. One old woman swore her television whispered her dead husband's name for 2 hours straight. Then there were the disappearances. 3 fishermen vanished within the same week. No bodies. No boats. Just seawater left behind on the docks. Sheriff Collins tried keeping order, but fear had already settled into the town like rot beneath wood. And every night, the lighthouse kept turning. Without fail. Without a keeper. I stopped sleeping completely after Collins disappeared. He never came home after our second visit to the tower. His police cruiser was found near the harbor the next morning, engines still running, Driver door open. Inside the seat, they found seawater. And his flashlight. Nothing else. The town finally began evacuating after that. Families packed cars overnight. Stores boarded their windows. Boats fled before sunset. But the fog followed everyone. Some cars returned hours later with nobody inside. Others were found abandoned along the coastal highway. Doors hanging open. Wet footprints leading away into the mist. I should have left too. I tried, but every road out of town curved back toward the harbor eventually. At first, I thought exhaustion was making me miss turns. Then I noticed something impossible. The gas station near the north exit appeared 3 times in 1 hour. Same broken sign. Same dog sleeping beside the ice machine. Same old man staring through the window. No matter which road I took, I kept circling back. Back toward the lighthouse. Like the town itself, no longer wanted to let people leave. That night the horn started calling more names. Not just mine anymore. Dozens, layered together beneath the sound. Men, women, children, some crying, some laughing softly, all carried inside that deep mechanical groan rolling across the sea. I stood outside my house listening to it while fog crawled across the empty streets. Then I heard a new voice, one I recognized immediately. My mother, dead for 11 years. Daniel. I nearly collapsed right there. The voice sounded exactly like her. Soft, tired, loving. Come home. Tears filled my eyes before I realized it. That thing knew us. It knew what voices to use, what pain to touch. The horn sounded again, and suddenly, every porch light on the street turned on at once. Doors began opening slowly across the neighborhood. People stepped outside, not speaking, not reacting, just walking toward the harbor, toward the lighthouse, like sleepwalkers. I saw old Mrs. Calder barefoot in the freezing street, a father carrying his son, 2 teenage boys with completely blank expressions, all moving toward the same place, the same sound. I shouted at them. Nobody answered. Their eyes looked distant, empty. I followed them because I couldn't stop myself. The fog thickened near the shore until people became shadows drifting ahead of me. Then the lighthouse appeared through the gray, its beam rotating slowly overhead. Waiting, hundreds of wet footprints covered the rocks around it. Fresh ones, some small enough to belong to children. The horn blasted again, and this time I understood something hidden beneath the voices. Movement, water, breathing. The sea itself was speaking through the tower. The crowd kept walking forward silently, straight toward the water line. My panic exploded. I grabbed the nearest man and shook him hard. He barely reacted. His lips moved softly instead. They're waiting below. I let go immediately, because seawater poured from his mouth when he spoke. Then shapes began rising near the shore. At first I thought they were rocks, but they moved. Human figures emerging slowly from black water. Pale faces, dark hollow eyes, bodies swollen from the sea. Dozens of them, walking calmly toward land. Nobody screamed. The townspeople simply kept moving to meet them. Like reunions, like they recognized each other. The lighthouse beam swept across the water one final time. And suddenly, I saw hundreds more shapes beneath the surface. Standing there, waiting in silence, not floating, standing, far below the ocean. My chest tightened so hard I thought my heart stopped. This had been happening for years, maybe longer. The names, the disappearances, the voices. The lighthouse wasn't warning ships away from danger. It was calling people home. The horn sounded directly above us, so loud it rattled my teeth. Then every figure in the water turned toward me at once. All of them, at the exact same second. I stumbled backward in terror, and among those faces, I saw Sheriff Collins, my mother, people who had vanished decades ago, all staring silently, not angry, not hungry, waiting. The lighthouse beam slowed overhead, its rotation becoming weaker, slower, like a heartbeat fading. Then the light stopped directly on me. The horn groaned one last time, and through it came my own voice, perfectly clear. "Daniel, take the light." The entire crowd turned toward the tower behind me. So did the figures in the ocean. Everything waited. For me, and somewhere deep inside myself, under all the fear, I understood something terrible. The lighthouse had never operated without a keeper. It had simply been waiting for the next one.